Good morning, it's 7 o'clock. On today's show, hopes dashed after a fifth body was found in the search of the super yacht that sank off the coast of Sicily.
Plus, the Home Office will release its immigration statistics this morning, shortly after promising a surge in return flights for migrants who don't hold rights to remain in the UK.
It's Thursday, the 22nd of August. Your headlines. The search for one person continues, with divers preparing to resume scouring the wreck of the Bayesian. Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz accepts his party's nomination, with the former coach promising to leave it on the field in the fight for the White House.
Say it with me. We're not going back.
Taylor Swift shares she has a new sense of fear and a tremendous amount of guilt after the foiled terror attack that forced her to cancel 3 concerts in Vienna.
Students across England, Wales and Northern Ireland are bracing themselves, with GCSE results being released later this morning.
HMP Wandsworth is found to be unsafe for inmates and staff alike after more than 1,000 assaults in a year. A very good morning to you. Our top story: divers are preparing to resume searching for the final person still missing after the super yacht Bayesian sank off the coast of Sicily on Monday. The bodies of 4 of the 6 missing passengers have been recovered during search and rescue operations. Efforts to recover a 5th, found and located yesterday, will also resume today. Authorities are yet to confirm the identities, but British tech billionaire Mike Lynch, his daughter Hannah, and Morgan Stanley's Judith Bloomer are among those declared missing when the vessel sank. Asha Huriag has this report for us from Sicily.
The moment they had feared. This was no longer a rescue mission, but one of recovery. 56 hours after the luxury super yacht sank off the coast of Sicily, one by one, some of those missing were confirmed dead. Of the 22 people on board, those unaccounted for include billionaire Mike Lynch and his teenage daughter Hannah. His friends, the chairman of finance firm Morgan Stanley International, Judith Bloomer, and his wife Judy, lawyer Chris Morvillo and his wife Neda, were missing too. The discoveries follow the death of the onboard chef Ricaldo Thomas. His family have paid tribute to the kindest soul.
Rick was a free spirit, you know. He had a very beautiful soul, and he's been around on many boats, private boats, as a chef, initially as a cook.
Working within tight 10-minute windows, divers have been plunging into the depths below. This remote-controlled vehicle has been beaming images back to those on the harbour. What were once drawings, diagrams and data pored over by admirers of the award-winning vessel were instead the focus of rescue workers. This is where some of the bodies have been found. A boat that boasted sleek design and luxurious interiors is now on the seabed. After managing to get access to those 6 cabins, divers made the sombre and devastating discovery of the people inside. It's understood that 2 of those individuals had been hidden behind mattresses. They'd been celebrating and holidaying on the vessel that boasted the tallest aluminium mast in the world. There is now speculation it could have been a reason why it capsized. The chief executive of the company that owns the firm which built the yacht leapt to its defence.
Knowing very well how the boats have always been designed and built, the sailing boats, it is well known, they're the safest in the most absolute sense. First of all, because they have very little surface compared to a yacht facing into the wind. Second, with the structure, the drift keel, they become unsinkable bodies.
The investigation into the incident is ongoing. Italian inspectors have spent hours questioning the yacht's captain, who managed to escape. They are considering the stability, how it was operated and the weather conditions. There will be difficult questions in time, but for now, very few answers.
Well, let's bring in Ashna now, who joins us once again live from Sicily, from Porticello. Ashna, so devastating as the news crossed yesterday of these bodies being recovered. I guess the focus today will be on when they are formally identified. Either way, was there a great sort of moment of sadness across the region where you've been covering all week once it was confirmed the bodies had been recovered?
Well, if you look at Italian law, Italian authorities, when they exhume a body, they have to let the family know before they release that information and make it public. There have been conflicting reports in the press, and none of which has been confirmed and verified by us here at Sky News. Referencing your question there about the mood here, absolutely yesterday there was that significance and that poignancy that wasn't lost on the some 50 people that had gathered to sort of watch this extraordinary search and rescue effort as divers once again today, and like they did yesterday, plunged 160 feet down to go and look around that vessel to try their best to try and locate those people. And we know that they were working throughout those harsh, searing heat temperatures, but also diving into that water in those conditions where you're barely able to see anything. And as we've spoken about quite a bit, within those short time windows, and very quickly at about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, it was very clear that there was no signs of life, and we began to see lots of movement around us as emergency services from search and rescue, the coastguard service, the vessels began circling that area where we know that the shipwreck is underneath the water, and they started to recover some of those that had been feared missing and now confirmed to have died. We know that they located 4 bodies. The air was filled with the sound of sirens as those bodies were loaded onto ambulances, and one by one those ambulances were driven off, escorted by police vehicles. Those bodies have now been taken to mortuaries. A formal identification process will now get underway, and in time, and as soon as they are able to identify those people, their families will be informed. Without being too graphic, those bodies, of course, went down into the water on Monday morning. It is now Thursday morning, so they will look a little bit different. So it may well take a lot of time for doctors at the specific hospital where those bodies are being now kept to try and do that formal identification. In terms of today, there is still one person they're yet to locate. We know there is another body that they found on board. They're struggling to get to it, but today it's understood that since it's daylight now, they might be able to get back in the water and start that process. Meanwhile, that's still that one person that's still missing.
Ashna, as always, thanks so much. Ashna Hiranag, who's been there in Porticello for us all week. Now, Kamala Harris's pick to be the next US Vice President, Tim Walz, has formally accepted his nomination and introduced himself to the nation at the Democratic National Convention. The Minnesota governor and former coach promised he and his running mate would leave it all on the field in the race for the White House. Our US correspondent, Mark Stone, has this report from the convention in Chicago.
We need to choose joy over anger.
Stevie Wonder emphasising the key theme to emerge through this week.
Joy! Joy!
Joy!
Joy!
To frame this election as a choice between hope, decency, joy, or Trump. A danger, yes, they say, but also they paint him as a sad character.
We are beyond ridiculous tweets and lies and foolery. People who seek first to divide and then to conquer. But here's the thing. When we stand together, it is impossible to conquer us.
The old guard this evening, Bill Clinton, America's 42nd president, with so much baggage, but still a titan of this party.
When Kamala Harris is president, every day will begin with you.
And now, with Biden gone, the jokes about age can be on Trump.
2 days ago, I turned 78. I'm still younger than Donald Trump.
With music and an endorsement from John Legend, there were more warnings about the extreme Project 2025 agenda published and associated with Donald Trump.
You ever seen a document that could kill a small animal and democracy at the same time? Here it is.
And then came their new star, high school teacher, soldier, football coach, dad. All-round regular bloke, Tim Walz.
Thank you, first of all, to Vice President Harris. Thanks for putting your trust in me.
If Harris is the city liberal, then he is the small-town guy who will maybe appeal across the political divide. That is their hope.
We're not going back.
The Minnesota governor, her choice for vice president. Few knew him a month ago, and yet she thinks everyone knows a guy like Tim.
Kamala Harris. She's fought on the side of the American people, and she's always done it with energy, with passion, and with joy.
There are echoes in here. Kennedy had his high hopes. Roosevelt said the happy days are here again. Harris hopes that her message of joy and decency will resonate, and his job is to reach the parts she can't.
It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team.
It was quite the act to follow, but in a few hours, Kamala Harris will be on this stage with her pitch to be president. Mark Stone, Sky News in Chicago.
I'm joined now by our US correspondent Martha Kellner, who's in Chicago. And Martha, I guess there's two questions here. The extent to which he went down well in the convention hall, but also whether it's permeating the message outside of the convention hall. I know you've been talking to voters as well over the last couple of days. And as the weeks roll on, that really is the much bigger question.
Yeah, those are clearly the two key questions. To answer the first one, there was a raucous reception for Tim Walz here this evening. This is the first time that he's spoken on a stage like this to a TV audience of this size. So there was a huge amount of pressure for his message to break through this evening. Interestingly, three of the men who took the stage before Tim Walz had been touted as potential running mates for Kamala Harris. There was the Pennsylvania Governor, Josh Shapiro, the Maryland Governor, Wes Moore, and the Transport Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. All three of those men have sparkling political credentials and perhaps are more slick political performers than Tim Walz. They're orators in the style of Barack Obama, and that was on display tonight. But what Tim Walz does have is a huge amount of likeability and relatability. It's one of the reasons that Kamala Harris picked him. Her team hope that he can appeal to a key demographic of white male voters, white male working class voters that could be wavering between her and Donald Trump. We don't know yet whether that message is permeating. We simply can't know because Tim Walz is such a new pick, being only two weeks into his role as Kamala Harris's running mate. Another demographic that the Democratic Party are focused on is Gen Z. It's why at every corner you turn inside this convention centre, you see someone filming content on their phone or on another camera and posting it to their millions of followers. And I've been spending quite a bit of this week looking at the world of the social media stars in the DNC. A warning, though, my report here contains flash photography.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandy Starr Merriweather. I'm here at the DNC.
Hola a todos, soy Juana Costa. I'm excited to connect with other content creators.
I cannot wait to hear my girl Kamala speak.
This is Kamala Harris's influencer army. For the first time, a group of 200 young people invited to document their experiences at the Democratic National Convention. Harris's campaign believes these people, with their millions of followers, are now as important as traditional media, if not more.
You can feel the energy behind Kamala Harris.
This is going to be a multi-outfit day. Today is day one.
But they're not impartial.
We're going to show up for Kamala Harris.
Deja Fox, a model and content creator, rallying for Harris on stage here.
It is about winning the narrative battle because little girls are listening to see what is possible. And so content creators like the ones you see here have the opportunity to shape a generation's political understanding in this election cycle.
Y'all, I was not expecting this video to go viral, but it did.
Brandy went viral for this video at one of Harris's rallies.
Does Gen Z know about Kamala Harris's policy? It's been like 3 weeks to a month now. Like, give my sister a break. She has time, right? But at the same time, I feel like the DNC stage is going to be the perfect opportunity to start laying out. We saw the economic policy come through. I look forward to seeing more and more.
Team Harris is aggressively pursuing Gen Z voters, using snappy slogans and innuendo to mock Republican policy and deriding the opposition.
I was riding with Biden. I was riding who was ever not Trump. But this would not exist without Kamala Harris.
The people aren't on legacy news. They're just not. They're on social media. People are on TikTok. They're in algorithmic pockets. That, there is no universal famous anymore.
This party on the edge of the convention is funded by a billionaire Democratic Party donor. Inside the arena, they have their own lounge.
Donald Trump can't draw crowds like this.
And prime seats.
Rude. Rude.
Much of Harris's momentum is being tied to her success online, a social media juggernaut run by a team in their mid-20s. One of the criticisms levelled at the Harris-Walz campaign is that at the moment it seems to be sustained more by style and sound bites than substance. Many people will want to know more about what they're actually going to do in power before they decide which way they're going to vote. But the clout these influencers carry online could be key, especially when it comes to pulling young people from behind a screen and into the ballot box. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Chicago.
Well, from the US to the UK now, teenagers across England, Wales and Northern Ireland will get their GCSE results this morning. Let's discuss that with the Schools Minister, Catherine McKinnell. A very good morning to you, Minister. Thanks so much for joining us. We were just discussing a little bit, because we obviously this time last week were covering A-level results day, and watching it all unfold, I found incredibly nerve-wracking and got taken back to that moment myself. I mean, the nerves are here again from my behalf for all of these millions of children across the country. Are you nervous for them as well today?
Do you know, I actually am bursting with pride, really, for these young people and everything they have been through. These were the cohort of young people that were going into Year 7, just starting on their secondary school journey as the pandemic struck. And they have overcome incredible adversity in the time they have been at secondary education. Their teachers, their schools have all worked incredibly hard. So, the results today, I think they should be incredibly proud of what they have achieved. And I know that it's a very exciting and important stepping stone to what comes next for all of them as well.
Clearly, these teenagers are at a point in life where increasingly each year passes, they take much more responsibility for their own decisions in themselves. Again, last week, there's different guidance as to what you do after your A-levels and a huge amount of options, and often the advice is it's up to them to pick and decide. After the age of 16, is there clearer guidance, albeit flexibility, on what should come next, ideally, for these teenagers?
I think for young people, there are a whole range of options. And I think that's a really important message to give today as well. That, some young people will get the results they're expecting, some will do better, some may not get what they hoped for. But actually, there are opportunities available, whether that's in vocational training, whether that's in a sixth form, whether that's in a college, whether it's an apprenticeship or whether it's going into the workplace. And I just think it's really important as a government that we make sure that those opportunities are available and that we keep building those opportunities as well. And that's one of the big priorities for this government, is to make sure that those opportunities are spread far and wide. Because as you say, young people need to make their choices, but we know that across the country, it's not always evenly spread how those decisions can be made. And for example, we saw last week on university admissions, 42% from London, but only 24% of young people going on to university from my region in the northeast. That, they are choices that those young people have made, but we want to make sure that they are choices and it's not down to a lack of opportunity or anything that the government could do to make sure that they get the best education and the best opportunities available.
Stepping back from exam results day, a new government, a chance to review the state of play. What do you make of the curriculum up to the age of 16? Is it largely in the right place, just needing a few tweaks? Does it need wholesale change?
So I think there's been a lot of quite right discussion about the curriculum. We know that times move on, and young people need to develop not only a knowledge that sets them up for life, but skills as well. And we know that there are so many important skills that young people need today that perhaps in my day were not quite the priority: critical thinking, problem solving, being adaptable to what comes next, whatever their future holds. So we will be looking at the curriculum across the board. We've got a curriculum and assessment review because the two are very linked. What you teach and how you assess it are very connected. And it won't be a short process because it needs to be done really well. It needs to be done in consultation with schools and with experts and also take input from young people as well. And we want to make sure that we have a really rich and broad curriculum that gives every young person the best start in life. And that's what we're going to make sure we deliver.
Lots of focus, of course, on the budget to come in October. A reminder of the tough decisions that are due to be made when we got the public sector net borrowing figures yesterday. Are you in your department prepared for making cuts to spending if necessary? Is that something that you think may be forced upon you, or do you hope your budget in particular for schools is going to be protected?
So we are very focused on making sure that everything we do in the Department of Education delivers those opportunities for young people. So it's right that we look at everything and make sure that it is being focused in the best way possible. We also know there are some significant challenges in the system, and we need to meet those, and we need to make sure we can afford to meet those. We've been very clear about the spending choices that we are going to make. We know that there are some revenue that we will want to bring in, for example, the tax on private schools. We've said very much that we want to focus on putting more teachers into our state schools. We want to focus on speech and language intervention in the very early years and make sure mental health support is available for young people. So we've been very clear about how we will raise money. We'll be very clear about how we want to spend that. And obviously, the spending review will take a much more holistic view of how the government is focusing its efforts on driving the economy and driving the country forward. But education clearly is a key part of how we drive our country and our economy forward, and so it's definitely a priority for this government.
Switching focus for a little bit, I wanted to talk about immigration. More data will be coming out today on that front, and we had some measures announced yesterday by the Home Secretary. Clearly, your government and the prior government disagree on tactics for tackling illegal immigration. The Rwanda plan was scrapped very quickly. Would it be wrong or right for the public to view you versus the previous government of having it in a different place in the list of priorities to stop the boats, as it were? You have a different tactic? Do you care less about it or the same?
So the difference, I would say, with our approach and that of the previous government is that we really want to take a grown-up approach to every aspect of government. And I think that's something that the country really welcomes. And we've been very clear about how we will tackle some of these big challenges that we know are a big priority for people, to know that our borders are safe, to know that we are processing the people that come to this country in an efficient way. So we've already made rearrangements in the Home Office to make sure we're prioritising processing people that come to this country. We've already put a 50% uplift on the number of people going after these criminal gangs. We are cooperating with our European neighbours, making sure that we work in a coordinated way to really tackle this criminality that is driving a lot of this trade. And I think, the main thing is that we drive it down by tackling it at source, which is through these criminal gangs. So we're taking a grown-up approach. We haven't got a slogan. We have got hard work, and we have started that work already.
We're about to get out to our colleague Fraser Maud. He's at a school in Salford ahead of kids getting their results, teenagers getting their results today. A final message, Minister, to those teenagers up and down the country about to get those GCSE results.
Do you know, like you, it gives butterflies remembering how it feels to go and get your results. I just wish everybody the very best of luck today and the very best for the future, whatever those results hold. There are opportunities, there is support, there is help available for you. Reach out, grab it, take advice and take the next step forward.
Catherine McKinnell, thanks so much for joining us, the Schools Minister here on Breakfast. And let's go out to Fraser, who's in Salford. Fraser, over to you.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm here at Ed Start, which is one of a group of 9 schools here in this region that provides alternative provision for special educational needs students. There's about 200 of them all told across 9 sites. About 40 of them study here, and of those, about 12 or so will be getting their results today. So nervous times for them, no doubt. Nervous times perhaps for the executive head teacher here, Kevin Buchanan. Kevin, we've been hearing that this is the first year of back to normality after the pandemic. Does it feel like that? Does it feel back to normal?
Morning. Yeah, in some respects, schools continued throughout the pandemic, particularly for our most vulnerable. We tried to provide some level of daily structure and support for those students. But the reality is, for all of those students, even now that are sitting the exams, those were transitioning from primary into Key Stage 3, into Key Stage 4 during that pandemic time. So I think it's very blasé just to say, oh, we can write off the pandemic and we can write off those missed educational times as something that in the past now and no longer to be considered. Particularly for the students that we work with, we have a great joy in service working with these young people, but they have had a very disenfranchised education journey. They've had very tough journeys at home and in the community, really, to get to this point. So for us, this GCSE day is really more about the milestone that allows them to celebrate that coming of age, that time to be a brilliant 16-year-old to look forward to the future, really. So the pandemic, yeah, it's still there, and the legacy of it will still be there, but I think it also uncovered an awful lot more of the social kind of needs of some of our most vulnerable in society, and we can't really lose the learning from that.
And do you think there is enough support, particularly for students like yours? I mean, we're hearing that there's yet more evidence this year, perhaps, of a north-south divide. We're obviously here in one of the more deprived areas of the north. Is there support there to allow you to give the best possible outcomes to these people?
It's a struggle. It's a fight. For us, as a small independent school, we are funded through local authorities, education and healthcare plans, or by other schools who partner with us for students with the most need. But the reality is, it's an ever-decreasing level of pie that everybody's fighting for some amount for. But I think what is true is that we are seeing an increasing EHCP, SEN need developing within our young people. The question really needs to be then asked as well, what is happening within our wider system that this need is coming to the fore more and more often, really. So it's good that we are of service to those young people. It's good that we can provide the education that they need. But ultimately, we want to be at a point where we put ourselves out of service, that actually the education offer for young people really needs to be more universal and more inclusive so that all young people can have their needs met, really.
And given that demographic, the neurodivergency that you have here, obviously a lot of students, a lot of pupils will have anxiety issues and so on as part of that special educational needs remit. In terms of that, do you think that exams, particularly for pupils like yours, are still the best way to assess ability?
I think exams do have an important part to play. We've got to have those kind of moderated external points where we can say this is where a young person is achieving. But I do think that there's a sense that they don't really take into account that part of a lifelong journey. They don't always take into account the starting point of a young person. So when we look at celebrating our young people who will get their results later on today, it's very much about recognising from their starting point, every single one of our students, 100% of our 90 students sitting GCSEs this year have made progress from their starting point. And for us, that is the right direction for them to travel in. It gives them a post-16 pathway. It gives them chances to make positive choices out of the future. But the reality is, the exam process in itself, if we look at any professional world these days, where in a professional world are you expected to know everything, condense it into 3 hours and then put it forward and say, I'm finished learning? What we want to develop is a culture of ongoing learning, lifelong learning, and also celebrate the milestone that is a GCSE.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Thanks for talking to us. So the students will be here arriving in the next hour or so. Fingers crossed for them. Fingers crossed for the thousands of students across England, Wales, Northern Ireland who are getting their results today.
Fraser, great stuff. Thanks so much. Taylor Swift has spoken out about the foiled terror attack in Vienna that forced her to cancel 3 concerts earlier this month. She posted on Instagram saying, having our Vienna shows cancelled was devastating. The reason for the cancellations filled me with a new sense of fear. She also spoke of a tremendous amount of guilt towards the fans who she had to cancel on. She then went on to say, I decided that all of my energy had to go towards helping to protect the nearly 500,000 people I had coming to see the shows in London. My team and I worked hand in hand with stadium staff and British authorities every day in pursuit of that goal, and I want to thank them for everything they did for us. Well, 3 people were arrested in connection with allegedly planning an ISIS-inspired attack in the Austrian capital. The US singer wrapped up the European leg of her Eras tour at Wembley on Tuesday. Now, an independent review of her HMP Wandsworth has found the prison is not safe and that conditions there are inhumane. The prison has been heavily scrutinised since the escape of inmate Daniel Khalif in September last year. The reviews found HMP Wandsworth is crumbling, overcrowded and vermin-infested, with inmates living in half the cell space intended from when it was first built. The report found that in the last year there were over 1,000 assaults on prisoners or staff, plus another 1,000 incidents of self-harm. There was often only 50% of the staff required on shift, meaning prisoners were usually kept in their cells for 22 hours a day and forced to choose between exercise or showering during their free time. The prison watchdog also found that access to contraband was alarmingly easy, while over half of prisoners said it was not difficult to access drugs. At least 11 people have been killed in northern Gaza after an Israeli airstrike hit a residential building. The Palestinian news agency Wafa claims the IDF targeted a location in the northern Gaza town of Beit Lahir in the early hours of the morning. It's the latest round of overnight strikes, with at least 17 people having been killed in Gaza the previous night. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, after former President Bill Clinton took aim at President Trump, we'll speak to one of his White House advisors. That's coming up. And as the search for the those missing in Sicily continues today, we'll hear from someone about the legacy of Mike Lynch.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Okay.
We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited.
Hello.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well? I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. A reminder of the top stories this hour. 5 bodies have been found by divers searching the wreck of the super yacht that sunk off the coast of Sicily. 4 bodies have been brought ashore and efforts to recover the 5th will continue on Thursday. The Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz has delivered his headline address to the Democratic National Convention. The Minnesota governor accepted his party's nomination, saying we'll turn the page on Donald Trump. A children's charity says the number of phone calls it's received about young people being physically punished has tripled across the country in the space of a year. A leading paediatric organisation has called for a UK-wide ban on smacking after Wales made such a move in 2022. Taylor Swift has opened up about the devastating decision to cancel her Vienna shows and said subsequent London shows were a beautiful dream. This week, the US singer wrapped up the European leg of her Eras tour at Wembley. Mari's here. We're going to talk about the politics with Mari in a moment. But this, I mean, we're saying wrapping up the European leg of the tour. It has been an insane tour.
Yeah.
The records just keep on falling. The headline, though, I think, of her post overnight clearly is speaking openly about the cancellation of the nights in Vienna and saying that she was really pleased, obviously, that she did and nothing major happened, but still apologising to all those fans that obviously missed out.
Yeah, I mean, it must be really difficult for her to have to actually cancel a show where she knows, when you think about the amount of not just money, but time and effort people would have spent, people would have travelled from across the world to be at that show. They potentially would have saved up for years or months for, hotel and travel and everything else, and then to have it all dashed at the last minute is painful. But actually, there is a political link here. There's always a political link, Wilfred, because the Lib Dems, fun fact, they have actually tabled a motion to recognise the cultural and economic impact of the Eras tour on the UK. Because of her dates at Wembley and Edinburgh and other places in the UK, they estimate that around maybe about £1 billion has been boosted in the UK economy because of Taylor Swift, and therefore they want to thank her for
does this mean it will definitely be debated in Parliament?
Not necessarily.
It'd be good if it was.
Imagine.
Yeah. Well, it's not really even an imagine. It's quite a reasonable point, as you say. I mean, she's become, I think, the record holder for the most Wembley nights of a tour, overtaking Michael Jackson, 8, I think, in total across this. Now, of course, live tours today do seem to go on longer with more nights than perhaps back then, but you've still got to sell them out, and to sell out these, 90,000-seater stadiums quite so many times is insane.
Huge achievement.
Huge achievement. We have to move on now, alas. Although it's probably not alas. Mari prefers politics to Taylor Swift, fair to say. Always. Right, the Home Office releasing its latest immigration data, something that came up a little bit with our conversation with the Minister this morning, as well, of course, her brief on exam results days.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk us through the talking points today on this immigration data.
Yeah, so the Home Office are releasing these stats, and these are immigration stats all about a kind of a different groups of people. So let me run you through the list to start with. So it's people who are extending their stay temporarily or permanently, people who are gaining citizenship, people who are applying for asylum, people who are being detained or removed. We talk about that a lot, don't we? And also people who are coming here for work or for family reasons or for study. And that will be interesting to look at because we know that under the previous government, they tightened up the visa regulations around bringing dependents. If you were a student, trying to kind of tighten that and stop people bringing dependents that then might potentially cost the taxpayer money. Now, this is interesting on many levels. First of all, immigration was a huge issue during the election campaign, and therefore people are going to want to see what is being done about promises and rhetoric rather than just people continuing to talk. Now, the difficulty with this is obviously the figures are going to be from a time when the government were not in power, and therefore they are going to essentially be able to blame it on the previous government. But nonetheless, it will be indicative of where we are, of the trends and the patterns that we're seeing, whether things obviously are going up or down in different areas of migration. And also, irrespective really of what the numbers are, provided that they are reasonably high, Reform are realistically going to use this as a weapon to beat both main parties with, really, to try and say, people are not being listened to, we need a change in our democratic system, nobody's going to get immigration down but us. So realistically, we can expect, I think, a bit of a response from the Reform Party as well. And this is all coming after what we saw yesterday, which was Yvette Cooper outlining those new measures for the Border Force Command, trying to say that they're cracking down on illegal immigration. Tories like Mel Stride and Priti Patel have said it's not ambitious enough and they should be setting a higher target when it comes to returns and deportations. But nonetheless, The difficulty is time is ticking, and at the moment the government will have the excuse of the previous government, but at some point that excuse will expire and they will have to look at some of these numbers that will come out in the next few months and start to take responsibility.
Mark, as always, thanks so much. Let's return now to the Democratic National Convention, where this morning Tim Walz accepted his nomination to be the Democrats' vice presidential candidate. We're joined now by Maurice Reed, a former senior aide to the Clinton administration and partner at consultancy firm Actum. Maurice, I'm mincing my words there, which is not acceptable because I've had some sleep. Presumably you haven't, and thank you for staying up for us.
Well, you know, it's a good time partying in Chicago, so always happy to stay up with you.
Maurice, anyway, great to have you with us. I want to step back. It's been an action-packed DNC thus far. Who's been the single standout performer for you?
I think Michelle Obama really brought down the House. It's interesting. We were talking that perhaps President Obama should have introduced her because she really was outstanding. Obamas in general are fantastic, but I really think so far Michelle Obama has really been the star of the show.
It's so interesting you single those two out. Of course, we had former President Clinton as well overnight, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton earlier in the week as well. Is there a risk, whether it was Walz today or more importantly Harris to come, that they look a little bit underwhelming relative to those massive big hitters that kind of warmed up the crowd in the days earlier?
No, I think that when you look at these conventions, it's a narrative over several days. So you start with Biden and really focused on the great work he's done. Then you bring in some of the superstars. Really what you want to do is remind the base that the Democratic Party is in good hands. You bring the Obamas, you bring the Clintons. You really tell the story that there have been two very successful Democratic presidents, 2 terms, economically successful. So you're framing the narrative. You then move on to the present in the future. You have the vice president nominee who came in and did a great job, new person, new energy, really connecting with those voters that the Democrats have struggled with in the past. And then you bring it home tomorrow with the actual nominee. I think she would be a compelling speaker. She doesn't need to be Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, or Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton. She needs to be herself, her authentic self, which I think the American people need to see tomorrow.
Have we started to see her authentic self already?
I think so. If you look at the last 33 days, they've really been spectacular. She's really hit the right note. And what I mean by hitting the right note, she didn't try to be the old Harris who ran for president. She was a politician then. What she's done now is coalesce the party around her, focused on a message that works for her, and she's really engaging in an authentic and relatable way. That's the most important thing for Vice President Harris, to be authentic and relatable these next 76 days.
So there's been a lot of focus, Maurice, on the fact that thus far it has been almost universally stump speeches in those 33 days that you just alluded to. It hasn't been a press conference with many questions from journalists, and it hasn't been a sit-down one-on-one interview, let alone a head-to-head debate, which might come. Will those more intense moments of scrutiny come? Will they come soon? And will she perform well when they do arrive?
Well, it's going to come immediately, right? So there's a sugar high, a honeymoon. Post tomorrow, you're getting to the third quarter, the fourth quarter in American football, overtime and football around the world. The debate will be the most important thing. It will be a head-to-head competition. Then post-debate, she's going to have to engage with reporters. She's going to have to roll out her substantive policy agenda. There can't be any more macro. She's going to have to really get into the micro, start to really address these pocketbook issues that the Americans are concerned with. And reporters post the convention will be much more aggressive and scrutinizing of her as a candidate because she will be the official nominee.
Is that a risk for her, or do you think she will step up to the plate and deliver as she has done over the last 30 days?
I think that she's going to have to be disciplined and focused and not try to be something that she's not. There's always a risk when you're starting to do these type of high-profile interviews. So she may stumble, but it's okay to stumble. As long as she's authentic and she's been honest and relatable, the American people will see through this. But there will certainly be more scrutiny. High probability that there will be some bumps in the road, and the debate will really set the direction on how things are going in the last 30 days of the campaign.
Finally, Morris, still too close to call?
As you know, it's always a risk. It's always a risk when you're doing this. And anytime you're engaging at this level, mistakes happen.
Is it just finally, Morris? Is it still too close to call, or are you starting to see someone eke into the lead in terms of likelihood of victory?
No, it's still a toss-up. I think we'll start to see really the narrative breakthrough and the numbers start to break post debate. I think around October 15th, October 20th, it'll start to be clear where this race is going and who's going to win. But right now, it's a toss-up.
Morris Reid, as always, a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
The Democratic National Convention there, Morris joining us from Chicago. Now, a children's charity has warned the number of phone calls it's received about young people being physically punished has more than tripled in a year. Sky Sabah Chowdhury's here to break down the striking nature of this tripling in the space of a year.
Yes, precisely. So, look, the NSPCC have called the stark rise in figures hugely concerning. For example, in March 2023, there are over 400 calls that were made to the charity. Now, fast forward to March this year, there were over 1,400 calls made. So, as you say, that's a triple increase. Now, the majority of these calls, they say, have come from concerned members of the public, mainly adults, but a tenth of them have come from children themselves who are experiencing some form of physical abuse. Now, the charity are saying that this really should be a wake-up call for our government in terms of getting rid of the grey areas in some parts of this country. For example, in England and Northern Ireland, the rules are slightly different, and they have called it in their report a legal anomaly, which allows sometimes some defences in place for essentially justifying physical, not physical discipline, I suppose, towards children, whereas in Wales and Scotland, slightly different rules. In March 2022, any type of corporal punishment was made illegal. In Scotland, it's a similar picture. They introduced a ban, but as I say, not the case yet in England and Northern Ireland. And for that reason, they are very, very keen for the government to have a more equal playing field in place to protect those that are the most vulnerable in our society.
Sabah, great stuff. Thanks so much. Now, we're going to move on now and talk about India's Supreme Court, which has requested an update into the investigation of the rape and murder of a junior doctor in Kolkata. The case sparked a nationwide walkout and protest by medical staff. Let's talk to our India correspondent, Neville Lazarus. He joins us now from Delhi. Neville, break it down for us.
Well, the Supreme Court has taken suo motu cognizance of this case. It has made some observations. Says it has the brutality has shocked the nation's conscience. It says there's been institutional safety has been missing, especially for young resident doctors. It has been very scathing on the state government and especially on the police, which they feel has been inadequate. That's why the case has been taken off the local police and given to the Central Bureau of Investigation, which is a federal agency which is looking into this case. They are providing a status update of the case. A 31-year-old man, a civil volunteer, has been arrested. There's been questioning of the principal of that college and also a number of people. Now, the Supreme Court has also set up a 9-member task force which will look into sort of a countrywide action plan and establish protocols of the safety and security measures which will be provided to doctors, all medical staff of government hospitals, their working conditions, their living conditions, even nitty-gritty parts of a hospital, like having CCTV cameras, control rooms that will look into the access of regular people inside, or common people inside the hospital. And this is because this civil volunteer man who has been arrested had unfettered access to the hospital, which where he is alleged to have brutally raped and killed this young doctor. She was found in a seminar room, so it has to be someone who knew the layout of the hospital, and therefore the Supreme Court coming down very heavy on the state government, the police, and now looking into this case minutely.
Neville, as always, thanks so much. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show as the search continues for one remaining missing body relating to the yacht that sank in Sicily. We'll discuss that story once again. A group of female medics from Afghanistan have been given the chance to resume their studies here in the UK. They were kicked out of university when the Taliban extended their ban on women getting an education nearly 2 years ago. 19 students have arrived in Scotland and will continue their medical degrees as they work to become doctors. Their arrival was help made possible by a charity set up in memory of Scottish aid worker Linda Norgrove, who was kidnapped by the Taliban in 2010 and killed during a rescue attempt.
Linda was working in Afghanistan for 3.5 years, and she working for the UN, and she loved working there. She went back to work after a break and spent a year and a half there before she was kidnapped and killed in a rescue attempt. She was very interested in working with women and children, and we were very aware that a lot of people had been killed during the rescue attempt, and women had been left without their husbands. And it was important to us to continue her work and help as much as we could to give support to women and children who are suffering in Afghanistan.
Over about the past 7 or 8 years, we've been operating a scholarship scheme to fund women who go to universities. And we ended up with about 160 students studying, 90 of whom were studying medicine to become doctors. That all changed totally 2 years ago when the Taliban kicked women out of university and they no longer allow them to be educated over the age of 12. So when Boris Johnson announced that there would be 20,000 refugees brought to Britain, we thought this was a great opportunity to try and bring some of our students over. It's difficult for us to really appreciate what they have to go through to get an education in Afghanistan to begin with. And out of the 90 medical students we have, we asked who would like to come to Scotland, and over 70 of them wanted to come. And then we had quite a selection process to go through those 70 to narrow it down to originally 20, and now 19 have actually arrived.
Welcome back. Returning now to our top story, where divers are resuming their search for the final person still missing after the super yacht Bayesian sank off the coast of Sicily on Monday. An update on the situation overnight that 4 bodies had been recovered yesterday and are now ashore. A 5th had been located but not yet brought ashore. 6th person still missing. Joining us to discuss the entire story, Katie Prescott, the technology business editor at The Times. Katie, of course, when we talk about those 6 people that were originally missing from earlier in the week, a lot of high-profile business leaders and indeed, tragically, their family members involved on the list. Let's touch on a couple of them. Mike Lynch, of course, the main man in the focus and a titan of British business over the last few decades.
Yes, a titan of British business, but one who's had a really, really difficult past decade. And so many viewers may not have heard of him, but he's in fact one of Britain's best known and most successful technology entrepreneurs. He started a company called Autonomy, which essentially helped businesses to process data that couldn't be put neatly into spreadsheets. And it really was very cutting edge in its time. It was bought by Hewlett-Packard for $11 billion in 2011. So that just gives you a sense of the scale of it. But since that sale, there was this enormous scandal over whether he had artificially inflated the numbers in autonomy to make it look worth more than it was, which was the allegation that Hewlett-Packard made against him. And this scandal really has dogged him for the last 10 years, and he's been fighting that. And the reason that this is so tragic beyond anything else is that the trip was a celebration of his acquittal in a criminal case over this trial that he's been fighting for the past decade. And he was looking forward to coming back to Britain and really starting his business career afresh.
And Katie, because of that court case dominating headlines as it relates to him over the course of the last decade or so, often there is less focus to his business successes since autonomy. During the decade or so since, he's been involved with some other very successful tech companies.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So after he sold autonomy, he decided to become a tech investor himself. He's at heart a real tech geek and a scientist. And one of the most successful businesses he started was a company called Darktrace, which is a cybersecurity business based around artificial intelligence. It's just been sold to an American buyer for $5 billion. And there've been other investments too in more artificial intelligence startups in the law and healthcare. So building a company like Autonomy provided financial success to other tech businesses, but also I think really inspired entrepreneurs here that companies in the UK could match their American peers. You know, it's very unusual for British tech businesses to get to the size that Autonomy did to list on the FTSE 100.
We're sadly out of time this hour. I'm sorry we've miscued that. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be back with all the day's headlines. Katie, thank you. Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. On today's show, hopes dash after a fifth body has been recovered in the search of the super yacht that sank off the coast of Sicily.
Plus, the Home Office will release its immigration statistics this morning, shortly after promising a surge in return flights for migrants who don't hold rights to remain in the UK.
It's Thursday, the 22nd of August. Your headlines. The search for a final person continues, with divers scouring the wreck of the Bayesian off the coast of Sicily. Democratic Vice Presidential candidate Tim Walz accepts his party's nomination, with the former coach promising to leave it on the field in the fight for the White House.
Say it with me. We're not going back.
Taylor Swift shares that she has a new sense of fear and a tremendous amount of guilt after the foiled terror attack that forced her to cancel 3 concerts in Vienna.
Students across England, Wales and Northern Ireland are waiting today very nervously for the big moment, the opening of the GCSE results later this morning.
HMP Wandsworth is found to be unsafe for inmates and staff alike after more than 1,000 assaults in a year. Good morning to you. Our top story: divers have recovered the fifth body of those missing after the super yacht Bayesian sank off the coast of Sicily on Monday. One remains missing. Authorities are yet to confirm the identities, with British tech billionaire Mike Lynch, his daughter Hannah and Morgan Stanley's Judith Bloomer among those declared missing when the vessel sank. Let's go to our correspondent Ashna Hirinag, who joins us with more on that breaking news, Ashna, that the fifth body has been recovered.
Yeah, we can now confirm that we've seen, from standing here on the port just behind me, we have seen the process that we have seen so very often over the past 24 hours. That fifth body bag, that fifth body has been recovered, now brought ashore. It was received and handed over by divers. We know that some 8 divers have been in the water from about 6:30 this morning, and they had located very late last night that fifth person that they had been looking for, and we watched our search and rescue teams received that body, and they then loaded it into the ambulance, and as we're likely to see in the next few moments, that ambulance that's on that harbour side, white in colour, is going to be taken away probably to the same mortuary that the other bodies are being housed in. Yesterday, we know that 4 bodies were found, located, brought ashore, and we knew very late last night that they had found a fifth person, but that they were trapped in some way. They were struggling to get to them. But this morning, clearly divers have made progress very early on, have managed to dislodge some items and moved away some of the wreckage in order to get to this person whom they have brought ashore. The name, the genders, the identities of those that have been found so far, I say so far because one person is still missing. Authorities are not able to find just yet that 6th missing person. They managed to get those people to shore, but their identities are yet to be confirmed, yet to be revealed. That is because Italian authorities today will start the process of identifying those who have been recovered and then, of course, informing their families. And given that we know that they are tourists, they are international figures, this will likely take some time if they're having to deal with time differences, accessing phone lines to speak to families who may be in different countries and may not be in Sicily at this point in time. But as we have been seeing, as I say, in the last few moments, that fifth person has been recovered.
Ashna, what's the mood like there, and what's it been like in the last 24 hours as those bodies have been recovered? And I guess what hope had existed has been dashed.
It has been dashed. I mean, no signs of life being reported yesterday. And as soon as we had confirmation that those bodies had been recovered, very quickly the mood shifted as soon as we discovered this was no longer a rescue mission and rescue operation, but instead was a recovery one. And the mood was quite silent, actually. As soon as those first bodies were brought to shore, there was a lot of press, media interest, a lot of cameras here, journalists, but also a lot of locals. Now, it's still very early in the morning. It's 9 o'clock in the morning here in Sicily, and so there aren't that many locals around. But yesterday, there were people standing on the steps. This area where I'm standing on the marina was full of people, about 60 in total. Locals just looking on, and actually some reports of children holding their parents' hands. And in fact, one dad said to his child yesterday, he pointed over at the divers and said, that's very difficult, that's not easy. And that gives you a sense of, I suppose, the shock that people have felt here. This is a very quiet village. This sort of thing really never happens. The fact there was a super yacht pretty much moored just off the coast of the port was really exciting for people. People were taking photographs of it. So when this storm arrived on Monday and then they discovered this tragic incident that had unfolded, there was absolutely palpable shock and sadness. And as we find and wait and watch and see where this investigation goes now, in terms of the recovery of that sixth person, thoughts turn, of course, to those survivors and the relatives of those who have been missing for so long.
Ashna, thanks so much. Ashna Hurinak there for us in Porticello, Sicily. To the US now, and Kamala Harris's pick to be the next US Vice President, Tim Walz, has formally accepted his nomination and introduced himself to the nation on the Democratic National Convention stage. The Minnesota governor and former American football coach promised he and his running mate would leave it all on the field in the race for the White House. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has this report from the convention in Chicago.
We need to choose joy over anger.
Stevie Wonder emphasising the key theme to emerge through this week.
Joy! Joy!
Joy!
Joy!
To frame this election as a choice between hope, decency, joy, or Trump. A danger, yes, they say, but also they paint him as a sad character.
We are beyond ridiculous tweets and lies and foolery. People who seek first to divide and then to conquer. But here's the thing. When we stand together, it is impossible to conquer us.
The old guard this evening, Bill Clinton, America's 42nd president, with so much baggage, but still a titan of this party.
When Kamala Harris is president, every day will begin with you.
And now, with Biden gone, the jokes about age can be on Trump.
2 days ago, I turned 78. I'm still younger than Donald Trump.
With music and an endorsement from John Legend, there were more warnings about the extreme Project 2025 agenda published and associated with Donald Trump.
You ever seen a document that could kill a small animal and democracy at the same time? Here it is.
And then came their new star, high school teacher, soldier, football coach, dad. All-round regular bloke, Tim Walz.
Thank you, first of all, to Vice President Harris. Thanks for putting your trust in me.
If Harris is the city liberal, then he is the small-town guy who will maybe appeal across the political divide. That is their hope.
We're not going back.
The Minnesota governor, her choice for vice president. Few knew him a month ago, and yet she thinks everyone knows a guy like Tim.
Kamala Harris. She's fought on the side of the American people, and she's always done it with energy, with passion, and with joy.
There are echoes in here. Kennedy had his high hopes. Roosevelt said the happy days are here again. Harris hopes that her message of joy and decency will resonate, and his job is to reach the parts she can't.
It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team.
It was quite the act to follow, but in a few hours, Kamala Harris will be on this stage with her pitch to be president. Mark Stone, Sky News in Chicago.
Well, already Kamala Harris has shown her power to get Gen Z and Gen Alpha involved in her campaign. That power was on full display at the convention as so-called content creators were deployed to amplify her message online to their millions of followers, as our US correspondent Martha Kellner has in this report.
Hi everyone, I'm Brandy Starr Merriweather. I'm here at the DNC.
Hola a todos, soy Juana Costa. I'm excited to connect with other content creators.
I cannot wait to hear my girl Kamala speak.
This is Kamala Harris's influencer army. For the first time, a group of 200 young people invited to document their experiences at the Democratic National Convention. Harris's campaign believes these people, with their millions of followers, are now as important as traditional media, if not more.
You can feel the energy behind Kamala Harris.
This is going to be a multi-outfit day. Today is day one.
But they're not impartial.
We're going to show up for Kamala Harris.
Deja Fox, a model and content creator, rallying for Harris on stage here.
It is about winning the narrative battle because little girls are listening to see what is possible. And so content creators like the ones you see here have the opportunity to shape a generation's political understanding in this election cycle.
Y'all, I was not expecting this video to go viral, but it did.
Brandy went viral for this video at one of Harris's rallies.
Does Gen Z know about Kamala Harris's policy?
It's been like 3 weeks to a month now. Give my sister a break. She has time, right? But at the same time, I feel like the DNC stage is going to be the perfect opportunity to start laying out. We saw the economic policy come through. I look forward to seeing more and more.
Team Harris is aggressively pursuing Gen Z voters, using snappy slogans and innuendo to mock Republican policy and deriding the opposition.
I was riding with Biden. I was riding who was ever not Trump. But this would not exist without Kamala Harris.
The people aren't on legacy news. They're just not. They're on social media. People are on TikTok. They're in algorithmic pockets. That, there is no universal famous anymore.
This party on the edge of the convention is funded by a billionaire Democratic Party donor. Inside the arena, they have their own lounge.
Donald Trump can't draw crowds like this.
And prime seats.
Rude. Rude.
Much of Harris's momentum is being tied to her success online, a social media juggernaut run by a team in their mid-20s.
One of the criticisms levelled at the Harris-Walz campaign is that at the moment it seems to be sustained more by style and sound bites than substance. Many people will want to know more about what they're actually going to do in power before they decide which way they're going to vote. But the clout these influencers carry online could be key, especially when it comes to pulling young people from behind a screen and into the ballot box. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Chicago.
Now, teenagers across the country will get their GCSE results this morning from 8 a.m. Fraser Maud is in Salford, ready to see how students at EdStart School have done. Fraser, talk us through the mood there ahead of people getting their results.
Is that all right? You sure? Yeah, good morning. I'm here at EdStart in Salford. It provides special educational needs provision for about 200 students across the northwest. With about 40 of them here, about 12 or so are going to get their results today. Can have a chat, hopefully, with one of them here. Carmel, I know you've only just got your results. How has it gone? Okay? Are you happy?
Considering the amount of time that I missed off school, for personal reasons, I'm happy with what I got, and I tried my hardest on them. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without the help of everyone here from EdStart.
So what's been different here at EdStart? Because I know that you struggled with attendance, didn't you, previously, but you've made massive improvements here. What's made the change?
Definitely the staff, the teachers, the people that run it. They care more about every student rather than at a mainstream school where it's just numbers on a page.
So you've got your results today. What do GCSEs mean to you? What are they in terms of your future and in terms of how you're feeling about yourself now?
Well, they mean whether I'm getting into college or resitting.
And what do you think you'll be doing? I don't want to pry too much.
Hopefully. I've done all right on the ones that I need, so hopefully I won't have to resit them.
Fantastic. Fingers crossed. Hope that's all right. So you're looking forward to the future?
Yeah.
That's the key thing. Kevin Buchanan, Executive Head Teacher here. You have a lot of students who've had a very difficult time during these GCSEs, not least because they started them under the sort of backlog of pandemic and so on. How difficult has it been this year?
I think for a lot of young people, getting into that daily exam routine and getting into that kind of sense of expectation, it's a lot of pressure, particularly for these young people who perhaps came from primary schools where there was no SATs, there was none of that previous exam experience. So it's a totally kind of new thing. So we talked before about the pandemic. Actually, that legacy is still very much there. But I think what we want to also really talk about today is the fact that young people like Carmel, from their starting point, she has had a fantastic journey to the point of where she is now, and actually making that milestone of achieving and getting GCSEs, and I can just assure her now she has got more than enough to get her college placement, and she will be moving on to that confidently. But the reality is that for young people, an awful lot of pressure is put onto this one day, this one moment in life. And actually, let's just remember, with the mental health crisis that is going on in schools at the moment, young people are still young people. And so let's just be in a point of celebrating the journey for them as well. So it is incredibly difficult for a lot of young people, but I think what we'd like to say today is we're giving hope to some young people that it is possible. Don't ever write yourself off. Don't write off the GCSE pathway. Don't write off what can happen into the future. You can be a brilliant 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 22-year-old, and maybe even a brilliant 52-year-old as well.
Brilliant. Sound advice indeed. So, yeah, a lot of the students here, just the fact that they're going to be opening GCSE results today is a huge achievement and a huge improvement on the prospects that maybe they had only a year or two ago. So good luck to Carmel as she goes off to college, and good luck to everyone else who's opening their GCSE results today.
Indeed. Good luck to everyone involved. And Fraser, thanks so much for that. Now, an independent review of HMP Wandsworth has found that the prison is failing and is unsafe for inmates and staff working there. Let's speak to our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt. Martin, remind us why there's been more focused review of this particular prison, and what are the standout facts from the review for you?
Wandsworth Prison is seldom out of the headlines. There have been two recent scandals. Last year, a prisoner allegedly escaped by clinging to the underside of a lorry. He's due to stand trial. And a prison warder has admitted one charge of misconduct in a public office after the emergence of a sex tape from within the prison. So today's report is hardly a surprise to people who follow the ups and downs, and there aren't many ups of prisons in the UK. In May, the prison's inspectorate said that Wandsworth was failing in almost every aspect of his operation. The Victorian jail has long been a kind of symbol of all that's wrong in Britain's older jails. Physically crumbling, vermin-infested and overcrowded. Today's report by the Independent Monitoring Board says it's as bad as ever, and in some ways worse. In most cells there are two prisoners, and these are cells that were built in 1851 to house one prisoner alone. The report says basically that the prison is unsafe. There were 10 deaths of inmates last year, 6 of them were suicides. So some other facts and figures from today's report: nearly 1,000 assaults. In terms of seizure of contraband, 564 mobile phones were seized from inmates. That's up more than 50%. Drugs, 344 seizures, that's up a third. And a lot of this contraband is being delivered to cell windows by drones. And when security was upped at the gate, there was an increase in the flight of those drones. 261 were detected in the year that this report has been looking at. Other problems: staff absence is high and underfunding. The Ministry of Justice hasn't responded to this report yet. I'm sure it will today, but there has already been an upgrade of CCTV. Some of it was found not to have worked for a year. And the MOJ has allocated over the next 5 years £100 million for urgent improvements.
Martin, obviously this comes at a moment when they've just had to implement Operation Early Dawn, clearly a short-term measure, not meant to be long-term, and clearly the current status has been inherited by the new government. That said, looking forward, would it be more unforgivable if at the end of a parliamentary term from now we're in a similar position where these sorts of short-term operations, whether they change or not, have to be implemented? Or over the course of a parliament, could and should the prison capacity and quality issue be addressed? Is it quite achievable to address it by building new prisons, for example?
Well, a few years ago, I remember there was a big government programme to build new prisons, and prisons like Wandsworth and other Victorian prisons were due to be pulled down and replaced. But, you know, we had then entered a period of austerity. I mean, I've been inside Wandsworth prison, and it's grim. I mean, it is Dickensian in many aspects. And the author of today's report and I think the prison watchdog in its earlier report have both made the point that what they're finding today are issues that they found in the past, and the MOJ doesn't appear to have been willing or able to put them right.
How long does it take to come together to commission the building of a new prison? Could that happen very quickly if the money was there?
Well, new prisons are being built, and you mentioned this emergency measure to find cell space after the blitz on sentencing of the rioters. They did, at the very start of that, the government did manage to find 500 or so new cells that were due to be used in coming months, but they rushed forward their use. So things can be done, but as you say, I think a lot of it appears to be short-term. I mean, the basic issue of prisons is that for many, many years, they've been overcrowded.
Martin, as always, thanks so much. Martin Brandt. Taylor Swift has spoken out about the foiled terror attack in Vienna that forced her to cancel 3 concert dates earlier this month. She posted on Instagram saying, having our Vienna shows cancelled was devastating. The reason for the cancellations? Filled me with a new sense of fear and a tremendous amount of guilt. She then went on to say, I decided that all of my energy had to go towards helping to protect the nearly 500,000 people I had coming to see the shows in London. My team and I worked hand in hand with stadium staff and British authorities every day in pursuit of that goal. And I want to thank them for everything they did for us. Well, 3 people were arrested in connection with allegedly planning an ISIS-inspired attack in the Austrian capital. The US singer wrapped up the European leg of her Eras tour at Wembley on Tuesday. Now, at least 11 people have been killed in northern Gaza after an Israeli airstrike hit a residential building. The Palestinian news agency Wafa claims the IDF targeted a location in the northern Gaza town of Beit Lahir in the early hours of this morning. It's the latest round of overnight strikes, with at least 17 people having been killed in Gaza the previous night. Romanian police detained brothers Andrew and Tristan Tate after raiding several properties amid new allegations of trafficking minors and sex with a minor. The country's organised crime agency searched 4 homes in the counties of Bucharest and Ilfov. The controversial influencer, Andrew, and his brother are currently awaiting trial on charges of human trafficking, rape and forming a criminal gang to sexually exploit women. Both deny the charges and claim there's a conspiracy against them. The police inspectorate has warned a new plan for approaching rape cases requires major changes in order to work. Operation Soteria is a plan to transform how police handle rape cases by centring them around the experience of victims during investigations. However, His Majesty's Inspectorate of the Constabulary pointed to several issues, including the fact that half of rape investigation teams aren't fully qualified. Well, Alex Vice-Bryce is a rape survivor and former head of Survivors UK, and he joins me now. Alex, thanks so much for joining us. Firstly, just tell us, for those people that don't know, what Operation Soteria is and when it came in.
It's looking at rape investigations and how they can improve them for the victims of rape throughout the process.
And it came in a couple of years ago and aims to make it much more victim-centric and considerate towards the victims.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
And a new report has come out to suggest that whilst it's improved things, it should be improved further.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with that, and I think anything that makes the process for victims less traumatising, I think, would be welcome.
We'll come perhaps to some of the changes that could come about that you might or might not agree with in a moment. But first, wanted to explore, if it's all right with you, why you're such a great person to address this issue, because you were raped yourself?
Yes, that's right, yeah. So I was actually raped when I was 18, and I was at university. And at the time, I didn't feel comfortable coming forward, and didn't at the time report it to the police because I was too scared, and I just didn't think that rape was something that happens to men. So it's kind of the way I was kind of conditioned socially, I guess.
And that was a central reason, do you think, why you didn't come forward at the time? Yeah,
I think I felt a lot of shame. I blamed myself at the time, and we're sort of taught in society that rape is something perpetrated by men, which obviously it usually is, and doesn't, it happens to women. Again, more often it happens to women, but it does happen to men too.
And if, whether we take that gender-specific aspect of it away or not, in all the work that you have done, whether it's with Survivors UK or other areas, since your experience, do you think that's still a factor at play today, that whether it's through embarrassment or fear, people don't always want to come forward fully?
Yeah, and for me, I think now the main reason why most people don't come forward is because conviction rates are so low, and prosecution rates are so low, and I think people just don't think it's worth it. The trauma that you go through when you report to the police to go into court, if it ever gets there, it can be very difficult, and 1% is kind of the estimate for number of proportion of rapes that are reported that lead in a conviction.
Gosh, it's that low. And Operation Soteria was an attempt to try and address at least the experience that someone will go through during that process.
Yeah, and it's really welcome. The process normally from reporting to the police to go into court is an average of about 2 years or more. So that is welcome, and that part of the process needs to be improved. But for me, I think the fundamental flaw in the system is actually the trial. Our adversarial system results in kind of myths and misconceptions about rape being kind of perpetuated in the courtroom, which in itself is traumatising victims, but it also confuses juries who don't really understand, what rape is, how it happens, etc.
That's really interesting, and you're focusing on that because it then doesn't lead to the right results, or additionally also because it's so traumatising for the victim during the trial?
Yeah, and I think both, and obviously the Crown Prosecution Service are required to prosecute cases where they believe there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction, and if conviction rates are so low, then obviously they're obliged not to prosecute cases that they think won't be convicted, and then the police in turn, only put cases towards the CPS that they think will lead in prosecution. So obviously that trickle-down effect of the low conviction rates affects the whole system.
And when you mentioned the adversarial system, is there anything in mind? It seems like it's a very difficult area to address. Anything in mind you have that could be done to fix that, whilst obviously acknowledging the fact that most court cases are going to be adversarial in nature?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is we can't really do research with juries. Most research that's done with juries is kind of mock juries and mock trials. I think just lifting that ban and allowing some proper research done with juries about decision-making would be useful. But also I think there's some scope to really question whether juries are right for rape trials. And I know in other countries they have kind of panels of judges, they have experts, because juries, their perceptions are based on media narratives, etc., around sexual violence. And in the courtroom, rather than challenging those narratives, actually they're perpetuated because the defence, they prey on juries' kind of ignorance about sexual violence, and myths will be put forward, things like, what were people wearing, did they have any contact with the offender, all those things, when actually the majority of rape cases or sexual violence cases overall, people will actually know the perpetrator, the victims will know the perpetrator, rather than this kind of idea that people are, stranger rapes are a very small proportion of overall rapes.
Alex, thanks so much for joining us to share your story and your visions on that area, but also on how to improve Operation Soteria. Thanks so much, Alex Feist-Bryce. Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, many GCSE students and parents around the country will be asking this morning, what next? We'll speak to Catherine Sazin from the Association of Colleges to help answer that question.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute.
Okay. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited.
Hello.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well? I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. A reminder of the top stories this hour. 5 bodies have been found by divers searching the wreck of the super yacht that sunk off the coast of Sicily. 4 bodies have been brought ashore, and the 5th also today. The Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz has delivered his headline address to the Democratic National Convention. The Minnesota governor accepted his party's nomination, saying, "We'll turn the page on Donald Trump." Teenagers in England, Wales and Northern Ireland get their GCSE results today, with grading expected to be restored to pre-pandemic levels. Now, Taylor Swift has opened up about the devastating decision to cancel her Vienna shows and said the subsequent London shows were a beautiful dream. This week, the US singer wrapped up the European leg of her Eras tour. Let's move on and talk next about politics. Mari's here for that. The Home Office releasing its latest immigration data this morning. Mari, there's going to be a lot of focus on this data, as there always is, but the first big release of data, I guess, on this front as part of the new government, but also following some measures announced by Yvette Cooper yesterday.
Absolutely, exactly. That's the context, isn't it? So we had the Home Secretary yesterday talking about the ways they were going to crack down on people smuggling gangs, on employers who are employing people who don't have the right to work here. But this is all really, to an extent, kind of a bit of a precursor to the cold, hard facts, the numbers. And that's really where the jeopardy lies politically. So these stats from the Home Office this morning are going to outline trends on certain things. So it's people who are extending their stay, whether that be permanently or temporarily. It's people who are gaining citizenship, people who are applying for asylum. Also people who are being detained or removed. We talk about that a lot. And also, finally, people who are coming here for work, study or for family reasons. So it will kind of show us some of the trends and whether things are going up or down. But also it will be interesting to see whether some of the previous government's policies on visas and kind of clamping down on visas, making the salary threshold increased, clamping down on the amount of, or if you can, even take dependents with you when you're a student, all those kinds of things. So it'd be interesting to see how much of a knock-on effect some of those previous policies have had, as well as the fact that we're hearing from Labour about the kinds of things that they want to do to clamp down on illegal migration and reduce net migration. But what is also interesting is I think we're realistically going to be expecting to hear from the Reform Party on this. They are obviously going to try and weaponise any number that to them looks too big and then try and blame it on, yes, the previous government, but also try and then accuse the current government of not having a robust enough plan to really tackle with these issues. So the Labour Party are going to have to try and walk quite a difficult tightrope between not coming across as anti-immigration utterly and completely, because some of the people on the left of their party will be quite frustrated and alarmed by that, but nonetheless also understanding that if you look at some of the polling and public opinion, in general, people seem to want immigration to come down, and therefore they do need to engage with that. Otherwise, Reform will have an open goal to say you're not listening to the public.
It'll be interesting to see how this comes up as an issue as well during the Tory leadership race, because there's obviously nuances of how to tackle it within their own party and a spectrum of it, but it's probably quite an easy topic for them to all focus on.
Definitely. I mean, immigration is normally the kind of ground that the Conservative Party feels quite confident on. They feel like it's somewhere that they can be quite strong. Recently, that has kind of started to disintegrate because of the levels of migration, the numbers, legal and illegal, on their watch. People don't really believe them in the same way that they did before. But we've heard from several leadership candidates since Labour started talking about their strategy on immigration, saying it's not ambitious enough or saying they should still bring back Rwanda. And so this is really going to appeal to the voter base for the leadership race, which is not just MPs, but Tory members, and they care about immigration.
Mari, thanks so much. Let's return now to this year's GCSE results and bring in Catherine Sazin, the Director of Education Policy at the Association of Colleges. Thanks so much for joining us, Catherine. First and foremost, a message to all the teenagers across the country getting their results today?
So, congratulations to all those young people who are receiving results today. You've worked really hard, and hopefully you feel that you've got the results that you deserve. And also a shout out to all the incredible teachers out there who supported and support staff who've helped get young people the results today.
There's quite a few options for 16-year-olds as to what to do over the next couple of years. Talk us through the benefits of the different options out there.
Yeah, so you can go on and do A-levels. So those are academic qualifications that are probably leading to university. But at the same time, there are many other vocational technical options out there as well. So you could train to become a farmer, or you could do digital media or catering or engineering. And you could do those in a variety of ways. So we have qualifications such as BTECs or Cambridge Technicals, and we also have the new T-level qualifications, and there are more of those coming on board this year. And if you're not a student who's going on to level 3, so that's the A level or the T level or that level, then there are lots of options available for you as well at college. Options that will enable you to get into work, or options that will enable you to progress to higher levels as well. So lots of opportunities out there.
What do you make of the GCSE curriculum as it stands? Is it ripe for a broad review, or just tweaks around the edges, or is it pretty appropriate?
I think it's brilliant that we've got the opportunity to review the curriculum. Obviously, at the Association of Colleges, we're particularly focused on that 16 to 19 curriculum, making sure that it does have breadth, making sure that we have opportunities for enrichment, opportunities for work experience, really good, solid careers information, advice and guidance, and just general support for students. So I think in many respects, it's actually the wraparound that is really important. And I think also focusing on assessment. So there's a lot of assessment in the system, and perhaps we could try and vary that assessment a little to ensure that it works for a variety of different students.
Do you think that exams still carry too much weight in terms of the outcomes that teenagers and young adults have in their immediate life ahead of them? Or is the balance about right these days? Or is there just no real other alternative?
I think the most important thing to remember is that your exam results don't define you. I'm never asked, and I don't think you're asked as an adult, what grades did you get out? So I think the most important thing is to look at where you are now and then focus on where you want to be and look at the variety of opportunities that can get you there. I do think that we need to, as I said before, look at the assessment system, because I think it is quite burdensome, particularly at GCSE. You know, lots of young people getting their results today will have sat 20, 30 exams, and that's a lot of pressure. So I think there are things that we can do to improve that. But as I say, exams don't define you. There are lots of opportunities out there. You know, for those young people who have perhaps not got the results that they were expecting today, I would really urge that you seek advice. National Citizens Service, the National Career Service rather, is a brilliant place to start. You can also go down to your local college and they will definitely have an opportunity for you.
Catherine, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, Children's Charity says the number of phone calls it's received about young people being physically punished has more than tripled across the UK in a year. Sky's Sabah Chowdhury's here with, I guess, the context, Sabah, of what is certainly a very striking headline statistic.
Well, the numbers are very striking. So, for example, the NSPCC report states that in March 2023, so just last year, they received over 400 calls, and this was mainly from concerned adults and some children that were unfortunately getting affected. Compared to this time a year later, so March 2024, the numbers are at 1,400, slightly over, in fact, and that's a triple increase. The reason, they say, for the rise in these figures is a few different things. So they've been campaigning a lot harder, there's a helpline in place, and they also say that there's not so much understanding, they argue, when it comes to what is deemed acceptable or unacceptable for how we treat young people. Now, the NSPCC are saying that these stats should be considered a wake-up call for the government, and they should consider really level out the playing field in terms of the rules when it comes to how we treat children.
Well, talk me through the options the government has and that picture across the UK, how it differs.
Sure. So in Wales at the moment, any form of corporal punishment is banned. Similar picture in Scotland, and that's as of 2020. In England and Northern Ireland, however, it's slightly different. There are grey areas, as they've been described by the NSPCC, which sometimes allows defences to things like physical punishment. So for that reason, the NSPCC are calling on the government to make those changes to protect young people. Now, a spokesperson from the Department for Education has said the following in a statement in response to this. Any form of violence towards a child is completely unacceptable. And we're looking closely at the legal changes made in Wales and Scotland, so just as we mentioned, as we consider whether there is any more we could do in this area. We're already supporting teachers, social workers and all safeguarding professionals to spot the signs of abuse or neglect more quickly, including with our mandatory framework for safeguarding children. So again, as I say, this, they hope, will become in place some changes to the laws in England and Northern Ireland to protect some of society's most vulnerable people.
Sabah, thanks so much. To India now, where the Supreme Court has requested an update into the investigation of the rape and murder of a junior doctor in Kolkata. The case sparked nationwide walkouts and protests by doctors who are demanding safer working conditions for female colleagues. Let's bring in now our India correspondent, Neville Lazarus. Neville, what's the significance of this update that's being requested?
It is very significant because it's the Supreme Court, the topmost court in the country, which they can assume auto cognizance of this case because of the severity. I mean, it said that the brutality of the sexual assault has shocked the nation's conscience. The nation has a stake in protecting women, especially women doctors. It has constituted a 9-member national task force which will plan out a nationwide safety mechanisms for doctors, medical professionals across the country, looking into working conditions, living conditions, and also the nitty-gritty parts of it, of CCTV cameras, access to public across all the campuses in government hospitals. And this is important because the 31-year-old man who has been arrested in this case by the Central Bureau of Investigation, had unfettered access to parts of the hospital in Calcutta. The body was found on the 3rd floor in a seminar room, which meant that this person knew about it, had access to this place at all hours. The body was found very early in the morning. The death took place between 3 and 5 o'clock, according to the autopsy. But the Supreme Court taking up this issue, it is hearing the case right as we speak. They've just broken off for lunch. They will come back and looking at the very detailed entries by the police. There was scathing attacks on the state government, on the police itself, because they felt the police had botched up the investigation. It was taken out from their hands, handed over to the Central Bureau of Investigation, which is a federal agency, and now this agency is looking into the case. The Supreme Court monitoring it very closely because of the nature and the repercussions that it's had across the country with protests and strikes by doctors all over.
Neville, as always, thanks so much. Neville Lazarus there for us in Delhi. Well, still to come here on The Breakfast Show, a return to music after an 8-year hiatus and a new book out. It's a big month for Rizzle Kicks' Jordan Stevens, who'll be joining us in just a few moments. A group of female medics from Afghanistan have been given the chance to resume their studies here in the UK. They were kicked out of university when the Taliban extended their ban on women getting an education nearly 2 years ago. 19 students have arrived in Scotland and will continue their medical degrees as they work to become doctors. Their arrival was help made possible by a charity set up in memory of Scottish aid worker Linda Norgrove, who was kidnapped by the Taliban in 2010 and killed during a rescue attempt.
Linda was working in Afghanistan for 3.5 years, and she working for the UN, and she loved working there. She went back to work after a break and spent a year and a half there before she was kidnapped and killed in a rescue attempt. She was very interested in working with women and children, and we were very aware that a lot of people had been killed during the rescue attempt, and women had been left without their husbands. And it was important to us to continue her work and help as much as we could to give support to women and children who are suffering in Afghanistan.
Over about the past 7 or 8 years, we've been operating a scholarship scheme to fund women who go to universities. And we ended up with about 160 students studying, 90 of whom were studying medicine to become doctors. That all changed totally 2 years ago when the Taliban kicked women out of university and they no longer allow them to be educated over the age of 12. So when Boris Johnson announced that there would be 20,000 refugees brought to Britain, we thought this was a great opportunity to try and bring some of our students over. It's difficult for us to really appreciate what they have to go through to get an education in Afghanistan to begin with. And out of the 90 medical students we have, we asked who would like to come to Scotland, and over 70 of them wanted to come. And then we had quite a selection process to go through those 70 to narrow it down to originally 20, and now 19 have actually arrived.
Welcome back. British pop duo Rizzle Kicks are making a comeback after that relaunch. One of the duo, Jordan Stevens, has also been preparing for his book launch, which tackles topics including addiction and toxic masculinity. He's joining me in just a moment, but first, let's remind you of one of Rizzle Kicks' biggest hits.
Yes. Rizzle Kicks, Dag Nabbit. Yo, you might hear me make a record like Wilson, cause I love summer, no Rachel Wilson. Yes. The winter will come, we just have parties inside, it's still fun. We're jamming, pump this, we're banging. Chase your boyfriend, let's have him. We're rowdy, girls make our judgment cloudy, but when the sun comes out...
Well, delighted to say that we're joined now by one half of Rizzle Kicks, musician, actor and writer, Jordan Stevens. Jordan, great to have you with us.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Great to mix the music and teasing ahead to the book. But the big reason you're on with us today is the book, which comes out today.
The book is out right now, yeah.
And the title is Avoidance, Drugs, Heartbreak and Dogs. Yeah. ADHD.
Yes.
So just talk us through the title and the thought behind it.
Well, I think it feels like ADHD is a hot button topic at the moment. The intention wasn't to jump on that wave. I myself have been diagnosed with ADHD twice. The book isn't about the struggles of ADHD or anything like that. It just appeared while I was writing it that the lens I see life through felt like it was representative of that part of my life, and the way I write the book even is quite reminiscent of how my thoughts work, which might be different to other people's.
It's a sort of memoir of sorts, but written as if things are unfolding live?
Yeah, I wrote it in present tense because I wanted people to come with me on my journey out of, I guess, confusion and into something towards harmony. Hands up, I'm obviously still a work in progress, but I am in a much healthier place than I was during the book, the time I write about.
Well, that's great to hear, and we've got lots of little subtopics to get to, but it seems like central to a lot of this was a very early rise to fame and superstardom, sure. and did that take you off course?
I actually barely mention Rizzle Kicks in the book, and I do that on purpose because I wanted the book to centre around my processing of griefs, many griefs. And for me, grief is such a unifying experience, and the only time I really talk about fame or celebrity is just to give people the idea that I had time and money, which can be quite dangerous when somebody is struggling to process an emotion. But ultimately, the book is supposed to be just about that feeling, and grief doesn't care about how famous you are, how many things you own. Heartbreak doesn't look at your average income and then decide how much it's going to hurt you. It hurts everybody, and it's a language everyone speaks, and so that's what I wanted to focus on.
Have you ever got over grief?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, grief, I think it's something you end up kind of folding and putting in your pocket, as my mum would say. But it's just an experience everybody has to go through, and the more effectively we process it, the more capable we become as humans, I believe.
And if we touch on some of the other areas that the book covers, I mean, avoidance is in the title. Yeah. You have to face up to these things.
Yeah, avoidance is a big one. With I could have maybe chosen addiction or anger, but avoidance I felt encapsulated more of the cultural nuance of battling against our needs to process, because I do believe that we still even glamorise some of the coping mechanisms or non-coping mechanisms, actually, as in like binge drinking or searching for validation elsewhere. That is avoidance. That is an avoidance that I lent into for a long part of my life, and I, decided to try and not do that. It's also a little nod to my attachment style, but that's another thing.
Yeah, well, you explained
so the attachment theory is also an outlook on love and how people connect. Mm-hmm. And I was certainly an avoidant person in relationships for a long time.
And if we pick up on that a little bit, you've written in the past as well about toxic masculinity, but you have a bit of a different view to perhaps some people on that?
Well, no, when I originally used the term toxic masculinity, I felt like it represented a clear differentiation from masculinity. Nowadays, I wonder a little bit, because my focus is definitely on encouraging boys to love themselves and feel good and feel worthy, and young men, that I worry that it's kind of taken on a life of its own. But, I understand the term to mean as something separate to masculinity. Authentic, genuine masculinity is a beautiful thing, a wonderful thing I've been learning a lot about. And, I hope that me being as honest about my experiences I have been can help people, gain a better understanding of that complexity.
It sounds like you could hardly have been more open and honest based on the way you're talking today and the title of the book. If we can just touch on the two Ds in the title.
Yeah.
Start with drugs, we'll come to dogs.
Yeah.
But so were drugs an issue for you in the past?
Yeah, I certainly had. I think my main issue is with another D, which is destruction, self-destruction. And, again, I went to various methods in order to try and numb myself, not have to acknowledge maybe the choices I was making that were leading me to these same silly situations. So, yeah, and then, you know, there are drugs that come into the equation when you think about having to deal with ADHD. There's certain ways you can, you know... So it was important for me to say that. We live in a world where I think there's a very confusing idea of what's considered a drug and what's considered medicine. That's like maybe a book for another day. But, yeah, that's why drugs is there.
And dogs.
And dogs. I want to shout out my dog, Spike and Mimi. I don't know which camera to look at.
They're watching, for sure.
2 rescue dogs I got, but in the book I only talk about my first rescue dog, which is Spike. He had a massive impact on me, and I very much learnt the bare bones of love through that experience, and I adore both of them. And yeah, me and my girlfriend are very happy with our dogs.
and the book's obviously out today, and we're nearly out of time. But Rizzle Kicks, you're back in the studio.
Listen, Rizzle Kicks is back. We've come back purely out of a love for each other and a love for music. And, you know, we hope for the best. The music's out soon. The first song's out soon, so, yeah.
Well, good luck with it, Jordan. Thanks so much for joining us to talk about the book in particular.
Appreciate that.
Jordan Stevens,
Yeah,
his new book, Avoidance, Drugs, Heartbreak and Dogs, is out now. Jordan's off already to pick up another copy for himself, it seems. Quick look at the weather before we leave you. The remnants of Hurricane Nesto will clear eastwards today, but unsettled conditions will last into the bank holiday weekend. It's wet and windy out there now for parts of Britain, although Scotland is drying up from the west. Travel disruption is possible. That's the weather. That's also the end of this hour of The Breakfast Show. We'll be back after this short break. Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. On today's show, hope's dash after a fifth body's been recovered in the search of the super yacht that sank off the coast of Sicily on Monday.
Plus, the Home Office will release its immigration statistics this morning, shortly after promising a surge in return flights for migrants who don't hold the right to stay in the UK.
It's Thursday, the 22nd of August. Your headlines. The search for a final person continues, with divers scouring the wreck of the Bayesian off the coast of Sicily. Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz accepts his party's nomination, with the former coach promising to leave it on the field in the fight for the White House.
Say it with me. We're not going back.
Taylor Swift shares that she has a new sense of fear and a tremendous amount of guilt after the foiled terror attack that forced her to cancel 3 concerts in Vienna.
It's an emotional day for tens of thousands of students across England, Wales and Northern Ireland as they discover their GCSE results.
HMP Wandsworth is found to be unsafe for inmates and staff alike after more than 1,000 assaults in a year. A very good morning. We have breaking news on the top story of the day and indeed the week. Let's get straight out to our Ashna Hirinag in Porticello, Sicily.
Well, we are getting some updates from those who are on the port behind me, the Coast Guard, but also the search and rescue teams. I'm just going to hold off from just revealing that just yet until we get a sincere and confirmed confirmation of those people. We know that this morning, in the last hour, though, a fifth person's body was recovered from the water behind me. We know Coast Guards have been out in the water from 6:30 this morning. Divers are deep within that water, 160 foot down on the ground. We also know that this morning they're using their remote-controlled, almost like a robot that's patrolling the seabed, that's going underneath the seabed in an attempt to beam back as many pictures, as many videos as they can. It has been that device, but also the work of the divers in managing to get inside the boat that has managed to make sure that these 5 bodies have been brought ashore. You might be able to hear above me the Coast Guard helicopter has been circling. Movement began at about 3 p.m. Yesterday afternoon, and they restarted their search operation at 6:30 this morning. Now, the families, of course, have been anticipating news, and their worst fears have been confirmed in the most harrowing way. Confirmation that 5 of the missing individuals have now been found and brought ashore. The bodies of those people are at the local mortuary. We can hear every now and again the sound of sirens as one by one each body is brought onto an ambulance, and that ambulance is led away by police vehicles. We do understand, though, that 1 person is still missing on board that vessel. The latest from the Coast Guard is that they have not been able to locate that person's body, but they are still desperately searching. What's led to the discovery of the 5 bodies has been the fact that they've managed to gain access to some of those cabins where they feared that those people may have been sleeping the morning of, in the very, very early hours of Monday morning. So it now brings the total of people who have been killed in this incident to 6, because we know the 5 missing people. There's also the chef on board, whose body was found just metres from the wreckage on Monday morning, a man called Ricardo Thomas, who was of Canadian Antiguan heritage, been working on board as the cook. But that's the latest that we're bringing you here on Sky News. Updates coming thick and fast, though, from the Coast Guard.
Ashna, thanks so much for that. And as you said, awaiting the formal identification process to be complete. But I imagine with the number of bodies now brought ashore that the mood is pretty sombre.
It is pretty sombre, particularly now that more locals have come out here today. There are also thoughts turning to the questions around all of this. Yesterday, the chief executive of the Italian Sea Group told us in a UK exclusive here on Sky News that he was convinced that the design and the construction of this particular vessel was not flawed in any way. They, this group, are in charge of the construction and also in charge of the sale after buying out the original company that manufactured this boat. in 2021. After buying them out, they now hold responsibility for yachts like it, super yachts, mega yachts. Mr. Constantino told us that he vehemently defends his vessels. As I say, he was determined to stress to us how safe they were, given their design and construction. I believe we may be able to hear a little bit about what he told us yesterday.
Knowing very well how the boats have always been designed and built. The sailing boats, it is well known, they're the safest in the most absolute sense. First of all, because they have very little surface compared to a yacht facing into the wind. Second, with the structure, the drift keel, they become unsinkable bodies.
So there are questions that local prosecutors are putting to not only witnesses of this incident, but also survivors on board too. How, crucially, did a ship of this size sink so quickly? There are questions about the mast involved, that tall 70-metre mast, but also about the keel of this boat. Was it deployed quickly? And was the design anything to do with it? All of those questions will be ironed out and will be answered in time, both by Italian authorities, but also by 4 British inspectors from the UK Marine Accident and Emergency Branch, who are also here in Porticello. The scope of their investigation, we understand, it will assess things like the stability of the vessel, how it was operated, and crucially, the weather conditions.
Ashna, thanks so much. To the US now, and Kamala Harris's pick to be the next US Vice President, Tim Walz, has formally accepted his nomination and introduced himself to the nation at the Democratic National Convention. The Minnesota governor and former American football coach promised he and his running mate would leave it all on the field in the race for the White House. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has this report from the convention in Chicago.
We need to choose joy over anger.
Stevie Wonder emphasising the key theme to emerge through this week.
Joy!
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 Joy! To frame this election as a choice between hope, decency, joy, or Trump. A danger, yes, they say, but also they paint him as a sad character.
We are beyond ridiculous tweets and lies and foolery. People who seek first to divide and then to conquer. But here's the thing. When we stand together, it is impossible to conquer us.
The old guard this evening, Bill Clinton, America's 42nd president, with so much baggage, but still a titan of this party.
When Kamala Harris is president, every day will begin with you.
And now, with Biden gone, the jokes about age can be on Trump.
2 days ago, I turned 78. I'm still younger than Donald Trump.
With music and an endorsement from John Legend, there were more warnings about the extreme Project 2025 agenda published and associated with Donald Trump.
You ever seen a document that could kill a small animal and democracy at the same time? Here it is.
And then came their new star, high school teacher, soldier, football coach, dad. All-round regular bloke, Tim Walz.
Thank you, first of all, to Vice President Harris. Thanks for putting your trust in me.
If Harris is the city liberal, then he is the small-town guy who will maybe appeal across the political divide. That is their hope.
We're not going back.
The Minnesota governor, her choice for vice president. Few knew him a month ago, and yet she thinks everyone knows a guy like Tim.
Kamala Harris. She's fought on the side of the American people, and she's always done it with energy, with passion, and with joy.
There are echoes in here. Kennedy had his high hopes. Roosevelt said the happy days are here again. Harris.
We're going to come away from that report on last night's Democratic National Convention and go back out live to Porticello, Sicily, to join Ashna Hiranag with the breaking news of the names of 5 bodies recovered from the sunken yacht in the last 24 hours. Ashna.
The Italian Coast Guard has now confirmed to Sky News that the 5 missing people who have been found and brought ashore from that sunken yacht include 59-year-old Mike Lynch, Judith Bloomer, his friend, Christopher Morvillo, his lawyer, and their 2 wives, Judith Bloomer and Neda Morvillo. Those names coming to us as being reported by the Italian Coast Guard today. Now, it has now confirmed the worst fears of those who had been waiting for that news, their friends, their relatives, people that knew them. We knew that British tech billionaire Mike Lynch had been missing since Monday. Those 6 people have been reported missing. 5 bodies were recovered, 1 yesterday and 4 were recovered yesterday. Among them, as I say, British billionaire Mike Lynch, who had been celebrating being cleared of all fraud charges during his trial in the United States in June. He had been celebrating with his wife, with his daughter, who, Hannah, has yet to be found. But we are getting confirmation that Judith Bloomer, the chairman of Morgan Stanley International, has been found alongside his wife, Judy. Also found in the last few moments confirmation that Chris Morvillo, too, the lawyer that had represented Mike Lynch during his trial in June in the United States, has also been found alongside Chris Morvillo, his wife, Neda Morvillo. That confirmation coming in the last few moments from the Italian Coast Guard.
Ashna, just take us back a step, if you will, as we're brought this tragic news of the confirmation of those 5 individuals who sadly did die on board the Bayesian that sank on Monday, of course, alongside also the chef. It was confirmed his body was found earlier in the week. What have rescue teams been searching for in the last day or so? They found 5 bodies, but they're still searching for 1, and presumably based on the names you've read out, that they're still searching for Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, Hannah Lynch.
That's right, 18-year-old Hannah Lynch still missing, still unable to be located on that vessel. We know that she was reportedly meant to start at Oxford University to take up her studies there in a few weeks' time. And we know, crucially, that her mother, the wife of Mike Lynch, survived this tragic incident. She was one of 15 survivors. And we know that she is being housed in a local hotel, being kept up to date with every update that's come from those search and rescue teams. Let's remember that this rescue operation, and it was a rescue operation at first and is still, in theory, a rescue operation for Hannah Lynch, started on Monday morning. That extreme weather brought down that vessel, that super yacht, named the Bayesian, on Monday about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, when it capsized and sank. It's sitting about a mile away from me, just off this coast, on an axis at the bottom of the seabed, some 50 feet below the ground. It prompted this huge search and rescue operation. They knew that time was against them. They were really hoping there had been air pockets on that vessel where perhaps some of those that were still missing, 6 individuals in total were missing, could have been alive still. But yesterday, very quickly, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was movement around here on this port side. We've got a view of the operation itself, and we have been seeing this kind of sped-up activity, firefighters, search and rescue teams, divers, crucial in all of this, really ramped up their activity every now and again. The Coast Guard vessel has been coming back, bringing back those divers from that water. We know about 8 of them in total had been in the water this morning, rotating. They're only allowed down there, physically allowed down there at 10-minute windows at a time because of the conditions they're working under. And as we've been telling viewers, this is really meticulous work that they've been doing, and it's proved difficult because, as I say, the ship is tilted. It's been difficult to get into, and it's largely intact. But looking through the windows of the vessel, of the portholes, they've been able to see some of the debris flying around inside. It's been really difficult to try and see into the bedrooms. We know that the communal areas were accessible, but actually it turned out that perhaps furniture, debris of some kind in the capsizing of the vessel had been blocking these doorways in some way, and it was feared that given that this was 4:30, 4 o'clock in the morning on Monday that this happened, that many of those on board had been asleep. There were 12 12 passengers, 10 crew members, and ultimately 15 survivors who are found clinging to a life raft but still missing as of Monday were those 6 individuals. They had been on board allegedly celebrating, enjoying a holiday. Mike Lynch, having been cleared of those charges in the United States, was on board with his wife, with his daughter, Hannah, yet to be located, and on board with friends and lawyers who had helped him be cleared of those charges. It is understood that divers are still out there, and whilst they have seen no signs of life just yet, it does sort of confirm, really, that this is entering, certainly, almost certainly, inevitably, perhaps, a recovery mission for Hannah Lynch too.
Ashna, thanks so much for that, and stay with us. We're going to keep talking about this. Just to recap the state of play, that reminder, as Ashna was saying, there were 22 people on board, 12 passengers and 10 crew. The Bayesian, when it went down off the coast of Sicily early on Monday morning, 15 survivors with 7 missing initially. Quite quickly, the body of Ricardo Thomas, the Canadian chef on board, was found, and he was the first tragic death from this issue of the 22. 6 were still missing over the course of the last couple of days, and in the last 24 hours, 5 bodies have been recovered from the boat, and the names of those 5 have been confirmed as the British tech tycoon Mike Lynch, Jonathan Bloomer and his wife Judith Bloomer. Jonathan Bloomer is the chairman of Morgan Stanley International and has had a big, successful career in the City of London. The lawyer Christopher Morvillo of Clifford Chance, who was senior on the defence team for Mike Lynch in his recent case against US prosecutors, case he was acquitted from fraud in just a few weeks ago, and Chris Morvillo's wife, Neda Morvillo. The one remaining missing passenger is Mike and Angela Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, Hannah Lynch. Ashna, you've been there all week. It's been a roller coaster, no doubt, of emotions for the people there, but no more so than those people who are on the boat waiting agonisingly for the news that has reached them and been confirmed today, though there remains a modicum of hope, or is that too optimistic, about the one remaining missing passenger, Hannah Lynch, who's 18?
I think we're sort of entering an inevitable end to this chapter. I think by Monday night there were fears, but very much hopes were alive. And then come yesterday, I think once the retrieval of some of those people on board started to happen, I think it's fair to say that chances of survival were all but gone. And for families and relatives of those, and these were very prominent, well-known figures. I mean, you know, the chairman of Morgan Stanley International, Jonathan Bloomer, and his wife Judy, but also Chris Morvillo, a well-respected lawyer at the law firm Clifford Chance, and his wife, a jewellery maker, Neda. There will be people learning this news for the first time, maybe people that were connected to them in some way, friends, perhaps even relatives. But we understand that Italian authorities are doing their best to support the families. We know that support is being offered to them. They are being housed nearby, and we know that they also, those British nationals on board, are being supported by the British Embassy too. We've been speaking to the Italian, ambassador here in Italy, Edward Llewellyn, who has spoken about how he has had contact with those survivors. He has been helping them, or his team, officials there, have been helping them with things like paperwork, with things like phones, communication devices. Of course, everything that they had on them at the time when they set off for this holiday has gone down in this yacht. And it's been a difficult time for them, absolutely. It's also been a difficult time for people in this local area. This is a very small village, as we've been saying. This is a fishing village predominantly. I'm standing in the marina itself. So when you have every single day some 50 or so personnel over there, search and rescue teams constructing what is almost like a makeshift headquarters. It's quite an impressive and extraordinary operation to watch unfold. And there was that kind of that fascination with it. But as soon as that movement became apparent yesterday, that perhaps those divers had found some people, the mood very much shifted. It became more sombre, and the poignancy of what people were watching and witnessing was not lost on individuals. Locals here with their children, holding onto their children's hands, clutching on to children as they kind of watched as those bodies were recovered. And the process has been as modest, as respectful as it's able to be. There is a red coastguard vessel, also one owned by the search and rescue team, and between them it's also been acting as a kind of mobile centre, mobile operating unit, the bigger coastguard vessel. The divers have been getting refreshments, getting changed, swapping over diving equipment on that specific place, but once they have found those bodies, they then use a separate search and rescue vessel to bring them ashore, and you can hear the radio sometimes crackling over the port, and it gives you an indication that perhaps they're on their way back, and thoughts turn to what they may have had on board. And you could see on the back of the boat those people, two divers, essentially hinching up the bodies that they had recovered one by one to teams ready to receive them. And yesterday it was a really poignant sight. All of those, as I say, some 50 emergency services personnel lining up on the port side, on the harbour side, almost like a guard of honour. And before they'd been chatting away, but then once they'd retrieved those bodies, it was almost like this silence fell as they recovered those bodies, loaded them into the ambulances, and they were taken to nearby mortuaries.
Ashton, it must have been an incredibly draining week for those rescue divers as well. We have mentioned a number of times, of course, that the search continues for 18-year-old Hannah Lynch. Do we know if the search continues on the boat itself, or whether, although the investigations, of course, of what happened to the Bayesian will continue for days and weeks to come, whether the divers are no longer specifically searching on board the boat for her, and the search for her has broadened out or gone to a different area, or are there divers still down there in that regard?
I don't think those divers are going to stop until they have found the final person that they are looking for. The divers have been down there in sort of 10-minute windows. There are a number of them that are rotating and taking it in turns to go down there. It's a very specific skill set to go to the depth, to go down to the depth they're going to, but also to try and work in the conditions that they're operating in. It's incredibly hot here in Sicily. The water, thankfully, is warm, but it is, of course, still dark down there, and they're using their headlights as best they can to try and access the vessel. It is intact, this vessel. Even the mast is set to be the huge 70-foot or 70-metre sailing mast is said to be largely intact as well, but the hull of it was. And we know that sort of day 2 of this operation, they were starting to attempt to make their way inside. There have been dive teams that have come here from places like Naples, from Rome, from Sardinia. The resource has been pulled in, really, to try and get the best of the best on site. The divers have been assisted by technology too. We've been hearing that they're using remote-operated vehicles, essentially like under-the-water robots that are running along the seabed. Helpful because the hull itself is lying on the seabed, so they're beaming back pictures and videos that are being assessed behind me in those tents. And on the table, in front of those search and rescue teams and officials who are in charge of managing and communicating with those divers on board the Coast Guard vessel as they go in and out, are diagrams, are photographs, are dimensions, things that would be, and maps, things that are very, that will be very helpful, that have been very helpful in trying to locate specifically the bedrooms that they fear that those people may have been inside. We are unsure where the final person is located. Yesterday, we found out from authorities here that 2 of the bodies that they had recovered were hidden behind mattresses, and we were being told that there was a lot of furniture around, a lot of debris, and given that they were found behind mattresses, gives you, I think, a clear sense that those two bodies at least were found in bedrooms.
Ashna, thanks so much for that, and do stay close. A reminder of the very sad news this morning that the death toll from the Bayesian, which sank on Monday early morning off the coast of Sicily, has now risen to 6. Earlier in the week, the chef, Canadian-born Ricardo Thomas, was confirmed, and just in the last 20 minutes, Ashna confirming to us via the Coast Guard in Sicily that the deaths of Jonathan and Judith Bloomer, Christopher and Neda Morvillo, and Mike Lynch have been confirmed. The search for 18-year-old Hannah Lynch continues. Our thoughts and prayers with the families of all of those individuals. We did now want to talk a little bit more about one of them in particular and bring in a friend of Mike Lynch, Brent Homan, the entrepreneur and investor who's able to join us. Brent, I'm very sorry to you, as I know Mike was a friend of yours, but what is your reaction to the confirmation that he's one of the dead on board the boat?
Obviously, we were all hoping for a miracle. We knew it was unlikely, but you still hold out hope. As you've been saying, these things can happen. So it's just so unbelievably tragic for him to have gone through what he went through over the last 12 years, defending his name and not really living a full life. And to now for his death to be confirmed is obviously incredibly sad. And I think, what I can speak to really is just the reaction of the broader tech community in the UK. He's such a titan and a figurehead passing away, and so much sort of untapped potential and so much more that he would have been able to do.
And because he'd had such a long fight to clear his name, his acquittal coming in the US a few weeks ago, do you think his achievements in business and in tech had almost been misrepresented or not given sufficient praise over the course of the last decade?
I think in the UK, we are, again, tragically good at making people go from hero to zero very quickly. It's a sort of narrative that people quite like. Yes, I think it would have been tougher for him to have held his head up high. But, when you look at the reaction and the reaction that you and others and I've had to his passing now, you'll see that the tech community are just saying, wow, he really made an impact on us. He really was an inspiring figure for so many. He really did help people commercialize inventions at scale. So I think, it is important now that his passing is confirmed to think about his legacy, to think about, I'm sure the family will be thinking about that when they're gone through the worst of their grieving. But I think it's important that his legacy is celebrated and his impact on entrepreneurship in the UK is highlighted.
And just for our viewers that aren't aware, remind us of his first great business triumph, which was a company called Autonomy.
Yeah, Autonomy was a triumph of his understanding, his deep understanding of mathematics, and I guess what today we call machine learning, which is the precursor of AI. And really, it enabled you to make sense of unstructured data. He pitched me the business 28 years ago when he had just recently started it. And it was the ability to both find unstructured data and then be able to commercialize that at significant scale that was so unique about the Autonomy story.
What was he like in that pitch back then, Brent? Presumably, you were both young men then, and did he still have the brilliance, the confidence to go with the pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. Always a confidence. I mean, look, definitely an enthusiasm and a passion and a love for the maths and the science and the computer science, as it were. But I think it was that enthusiasm that, and even though I didn't understand the maths, I realized it was credible, which is interesting in a pitch. You often get people with smoke and mirrors and that sort of stuff, but you could tell this was someone who understood at a deep level what his product and invention basically was able to do. And so, although I was very naive and young at the time, I was like, I told my bosses, came back telling my bosses, we should sign this up. This should power our search engine.
Clearly, that business grew, and he sold it in 2011 to Hewlett-Packard, a fateful sale in some regards, which maybe we'll come back to. But since then, he's had other very high-profile business successes, if you're within the tech community in the UK. But given some of the coverage of his court case, many outside that don't know. What was the next big success?
Yeah, the next big success was obviously Darktrace. So he was able to keep a core loyal team from Autonomy who left and worked with him at Invoke Capital, his venture fund. And Invoke was part of the incubation of Darktrace and found what I understand is a brilliant CTO from Cambridge again. Mike was also very instrumental in this Cambridge tech cluster. And Darktrace is a company that uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to prevent cyber attacks. And it does that at a wonderful scale. Again, it's a world leader and went public, obviously, and was just taken private, or is in the process of being taken private for $5 billion. So another amazing story for UK tech. We lament so much that the UK is not able to scale tech. And here is somebody who did it not once, but twice. And whatever one says about Autonomy, it's still got to a massive scale. So it's that we want to celebrate, understand, and think, how do we have more of those stories in the UK? Because the UK needs more of them. And then the next company that his company was instrumental in was Luminance, which is legal tech. A lot of people now talk about how artificial intelligence is going to help the legal industry be much more efficient. And Luminance is another one of his companies that does that. So let's see whether that can get to that sort of scale as well.
Bren, you mentioned some of his character traits when you met him first decades ago, and those character traits continued. What about in your more recent conversations with him, whether it was just before or just after he faced trial in the United States? What were those conversations like?
I think obviously resilience, still wit and warmth, but also a courage, I think, would have to come now, because the courage to face up to the pressure he was facing, which is basically your whole life being destroyed by the US justice system, had he been found guilty. And I think his courage to face that trial rather than go to a country with no extradition treaty. So if he did that, he could have gone to a country with no extradition treaties and not had to go to the US. But he was a man of integrity who wanted to clear his name, I'm sure for himself, but also for his family.
And I guess, Brent, the thoughts chief among them today are with his family and his wife and daughter. It's almost an untold tragedy for them, given the turnarounds, the roller coaster ride their family has been on.
Yeah, I'm sure from the sort of elation that they would have had, the minutes where the judge says you're innocent, not long ago, as you've said, to this absolute tragedy of losing a husband and a daughter, presumably, and the tragedy of going through that accident herself for Mike's poor wife. So it must be unbearable, and I hope that she has close friends around her, giving her courage and strength. Because I think many of us can imagine that going through that must be just frankly unbearable.
Well, Brent, we really thank you for joining us to give us that perspective on so many levels. Brent Hoberman, a friend of Mike Lynch and investor that knew him and his achievements in business very well. Let's return to Ashna Hurinak, who's, as you know, live for us in Porticello, Sicily. Ashna, recap for us the news that we've learned in the last hour.
Well, the Italian Coast Guard has confirmed to Sky News that the 5 missing people who are now confirmed to have died in the sunken super yacht, their names have been confirmed by the Coast Guard to us as 59-year-old British tech tycoon Mike Lynch, his friend Jonathan Bloomer, his wife, Jonathan's wife, Judith Bloomer, and Christopher Morvillo, a friend again and a lawyer of Mike Lynch's, and also Christopher's wife, Neda, who is also a jewellery maker. This news coming, as I say, from the Coast Guard authorities who have been conducting this search and rescue operation in conjunction with those on land, in the air, and those on the water as well, and also, as we've been telling our viewers, those specialist dive teams. The bodies of those 5 individuals were lifted, 4 of those individuals were lifted out of the water yesterday. One other person, their body had been located last night, but they were unable to be retrieved at that point. So this morning we watched as that 5th person was brought ashore, put into a white ambulance and then driven away from the scene here, taken to a local hospital where formal identification has now taken place, as we understand it. Italian authorities have been working with the families of those who are here in Sicily. We know that some relatives of those affected have flown out here to Sicily and are staying nearby, supported by local teams here on the ground. But that work is still ongoing because we know that 6 people were missing on Monday and there is still 1 individual that remains missing. Hannah Lynch, the 18-year-old daughter of Mike Lynch, was also on board that vessel. And at the moment, we understand that she is unable to be located at this stage. But we know that divers will not rest until they find her. We've just seen divers putting on their wetsuits once again and heading out there. There are some already at the shipwreck site. They do a changeover as quickly as they can, as soon as they can. They pass on information that they've learnt from those having been down there, and back under they go in this kind of ongoing, desperate search that's been going on since 6:30 this morning and very much hasn't stopped since Monday, since they were able to get into the water. They haven't stopped searching. Meanwhile, at the same time, Italian prosecutors here have been questioning witnesses that night, that morning. They've been talking to those who were present, also on board that ship, and also those who survived this incident. Once it was, they were fit and well enough to do so, and were able to coherently remember those events. Their thoughts, their testimony was collated. All of it's going to be helpful to the future investigation that's currently ongoing, certainly from the Italian side. But also, too, that information will be shared and passed on wherever relevant to the British authorities, those from the UK Accident and Emergency Branch. They have confirmed to us that 4 inspectors landed in Palermo 2 days ago now, shortly after finding out that that incident had happened. They will be assessing things like the stability of the vessel, how it was operated, the weather conditions that day, and whether it had been operated in the correct fashion, whether it was able to withstand the dramatic weather conditions that initially caused all of this to happen.
Ashna, thank you again for recapping all that we've learnt in the last hour. Stay close, as I know that you will. We're going to bring in now former Royal Navy submarine captain Ryan Ramsey. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. First, a question which perhaps you won't be able to give us a definitive answer on, but they've been searching the vessel now for many days and they've recovered 5 of 6 missing bodies. Is it still quite possible that there is another one on board that they haven't been able to find or reach yet, or is that unlikely?
Good morning. I think that if there's one other missing person, they'll need to do a full search of the yacht in order to determine that. So actually, it's not known whether the body is still within the yacht or it's elsewhere at this stage.
In terms of the process of searching a boat that is 50 metres down, and I guess the sense of exhaustion that the divers would have felt. Talk us through that and some of the perspective you can give.
Well, I mean, my heart goes out to the divers that have been involved in this. What started out as a rescue operation is now a salvage operation. It's been exceptionally stressful for them, both mentally and physically. So if you take into account just the pressures that they're operating under, those are considerable. You take into account that it's dark, it's a platform that they've never been inside before, and they're having to recover bodies. That's huge amounts of psychological stress for those divers.
How physically tiring is it to be that deep, to come up and down, to go back and forth for multiple days?
It is exceptionally tiring for them, but they will be trained to do some of this. But this is an exceptional, what started out as a rescue operation in depths of water that they would primarily not want to operate in. So just the transit from the surface to the 50 meters down takes a considerable amount of time, and then of course, operating, you've only got a small window. You want to achieve as much as you possibly can in that window. That creates stress. And then, of course, you've got to recover afterwards.
Clearly, so much of the focus thus far has been on recovering those bodies, and the incredibly sad news that the death toll has certainly risen to 6, with one person still missing this morning, being all confirmed. Focus in the days ahead will turn to what happened and why these deaths came about. Have you had any further thoughts as more information, drips and drabs, have come out as to how it is possible for a boat this expensive, this advanced, to have sunk as quickly as it did?
I have given that thought. I think we do need to give those that carry out the accident investigation, they need to carry out that process. What I would say is that the vessel was at anchor to start with. It wasn't underway, which means, for example, the crew, there'll be less crew on watch at that particular time. So actually to respond quickly takes longer. So that's the first part, the crew availability to deal with this situation. The second one is that it was a very, very unique set of events that happened. And I don't think it would be interesting to see if any safety case had been prepared for a water spout to be able to deal with that. And the third part that will need to be looked at is actually the combination of being at anchor with a water spout, the impact of that on the platform itself. So what you'll find, I suspect, is that the platform operated as it should do, but it just wasn't prepared for that particular event.
Does that explain why it might have overturned and capsized, but not perhaps why it would have managed to take on quite so much water so quickly?
I think it does offer part of the explanation as to why it capsized. If the anchor's holding it in place and it's being subject to huge amounts of force, then that can happen. Why it took on water so quickly could have been for a variety of things. So, for example, during that really violent process, hull valves could have breached, so water comes in via that way. Windows would have been smashed, so water comes in that way. And if you put the combination of all those things together, that could explain why so much water came in so quickly.
In terms of how long it takes to get definitive answers, what's your expectation there? And do you think we will get definitive answers? I guess it seems that the boat is very much intact and presumably all of the relevant information can be gathered.
I think we will get definitive information from this. It may take some time. We're not talking days, maybe not weeks, maybe a month, 2 months or so. Firstly, they have to salvage the vessel, so they need to get the vessel off the bottom and back on land to look at it. And then, as with any investigation, if you look at aircraft, when incidents have happened with those, or flight and submersible, and when they recover that stuff, they put it all back together, and sometimes it can take months to come out with the exact answers as to what happened.
And just finally on that note, who has authority in this situation? Is it close enough to the Italian coastline that it's Italy that's in charge?
It's within Italian territorial waters, so yes, it would be Italy that takes the lead. But I'm certain that, as with any investigation, they will want to draw off the best from the world in order to make sure that they get the right answers. In the maritime world, everybody's very collaborative about how we deal with this. They'll want to learn lessons. They want to pass those lessons on to other mariners.
Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Let's just recap the news that we got an hour or so ago. Of course, earlier this week, the Bayesian sank off the coast of Sicily near the Porticello fishing village, and on board it had 22 souls, 12 passengers and 10 crew. There were 15 survivors immediately, with 7 missing. In the first day and a half, it was confirmed that Ricardo Thomas, the Canadian chef on board the boat, had died. His body had been recovered on the surface, with 6 people still missing. In the last 24 hours, 5 bodies have been recovered from on board the boat by divers, and those 5 people were identified formally by the Italian Coast Guard in the last hour. They were Jonathan and Judith Bloomer, Christopher and Neda Morvillo, and Mike Lynch. Mike Lynch's 18-year-old daughter, Hannah, remains missing. Mike Lynch, of course, has been very much in focus, having recently been acquitted of a fraud trial in the United States. Indeed, the gathering on this boat was to celebrate that acquittal and why it brought together so many of his friends and family, some of whom were directly involved in the trial. Let's just remind you of who Mike Lynch is, or sadly, who Mike Lynch was. He set up his first company, Linnet Systems Limited, in the late 1980s. In 1991, he founded Cambridge Neurodynamics, a fingerprint recognition business. He co-founded Autonomy using technology he had developed while a student at Cambridge University. That was in 1996, and was awarded an OBE in recognition of his service to UK enterprise in 2006. Autonomy was sold to Hewlett-Packard in 2011 for $11 billion. Soon after the acquisition, HP said that they'd uncovered serious accounting improprieties at the company. That led to a long trial and a long process where he was accused of fraud, ultimately in 2018 being indicted in the United States on criminal charges of fraud. He unsuccessfully fought to avoid extradition here in the UK to the US, and ultimately then had to testify before a jury in San Francisco earlier this year. He'd been kept under house arrest in San Francisco for over a year leading up to the trial. In June, he was cleared of all charges by a US jury in that fraud case related to the sale of his company back in 2011 to Hewlett-Packard. And we're able to bring back in now our correspondent Ashna Hiranak, who's been covering this story for us all week. And Ashna, you go through that context once again, and of course Mike Lynch is not the only person to have lost his life here, but he was the man that had gathered this group, a group to celebrate the great news he'd had just months earlier, which adds to the tragedy and the loss of life that has been confirmed today.
It's understood the Lynch family owned the vessel. The Bayesian super yacht was theirs, the £30 million boat, as you say, chartered for this special trip. Locals here say they could hear music sounding from the boat. The lights are on till very late, till the early hours, of Monday morning. There are reports from some of those survivors on board, 15 of them managed to survive from this, at 4 o'clock in the morning on Monday. The vessel started to tilt, they describe. Before then, we know it had capsized by 4:30, so within half an hour. There must have been utter terror on board after what you say had been a holiday. We know that the vessel had been hopping along the Italian coastline and had arrived here not very long ago. And we know that it was moored some 100 metres from the end of the pier. If you sort of stand by the port side, you're able to just see the vicinity, the invisible cordon that essentially has been put in place. It's manned by about 4 Coast Guard vessels, smaller tenders, smaller ribs among them, but also bigger ones too, where that is essentially the coordinated effort that's going on, is concentrated on that area. The robot that they're using to assist in this, the ROV is its proper name, the remote control device, is running alongside the seabed. It's capable of reaching depths of up to 300 metres. This current level of water that they are investigating, the hull is lying on the seabed some 50 metres below the surface of the water. And whilst divers can go in for a maximum of 10 minutes at a time, this ROV can operate for up to 7 hours. So they're able to, even though the divers might not be in there all the time and every single minute of the day, they are able to get a constant feed, if you like, of pictures, images that are being provided to the search and rescue teams, who will then go on to provide it to prosecutors and authorities that are looking into how this happened. As you mentioned, and as we've been talking about, tributes are being paid to those who are missing and now confirmed dead. Mike Lynch had been on board alongside his wife and daughter. And crucial in all of this, while there are now 6 people confirmed dead, 6 including the chef on board, whose body was found on Monday very near the wreckage, there are tributes that are being paid to some of those. In fact, we were speaking to a cousin of Ricardo Thomas. He was known as Rick to his friends and cousins, who described him as being a free spirit. He had a very beautiful soul. And another friend told us he was one of a kind, a very special human being, incredibly talented, with a contagious smile and laugh. Rick, or Ricardo Thomas, of Canadian and Antiguan heritage, he was one of 10 crew members on board. And given what we know about the other victims of this tragedy, he was the only crew member to lose his life. The search is still ongoing for 18-year-old Hannah Lynch, who we know is the daughter of Mike Lynch. She was on holiday with her parents. There are reports that she was due to go and study English at the University of Oxford, starting in a few weeks' time. And we heard when news broke that she had been missing, we'd heard from her school in West London that they were incredibly shocked by the news that Hannah and her father were reported missing in this tragic incident. As we have been reporting, Sky News understands that from the Italian Coast Guard has confirmed to us that 5 of those individuals have now been identified, Mike Lynch among them.
Ashna, it's just sort of untold the level of tragedy, whether it's relating to what Mike Lynch has been through recently or focusing on Hannah, who the search for obviously continues, who would have just got her A-level results. It's really so awful. The same, of course, applies to Jonathan and Judith Bloomer, Christopher and Neda Morvillo, and to Ricardo Thomas. It raises a thought to me, Ashna, of course, of those that have survived and what they must be feeling as these bodies were recovered in the course of the last 24 hours. Presumably they're still there in Italy, are they? And were there for the identification process and must be going through such an awful, awful process themselves. And naturally, they will be thinking about how lucky they were. We were speaking to the head of paediatric care at a children's hospital here in Sicily. He was the person that treated a mother and her baby who had been sleeping on the deck of the yacht. It was a very warm morning, and perhaps the baby was restless, but for whatever reason, about 4 a.m., she and her child were sleeping on the deck, and the doctor said that she was in the water within 2 minutes. Such was this tilting of the vessel and then the quick capsizing of over half an hour. She said, and she was terrified at the point that she lost control of her, she lost from her arms, her 1-year-old, but regained her over a matter of seconds. You can only imagine the terrifying nature of all of this. It was dark, it was pitch black in the morning, and to have this, to be awoken if you were sleeping by this movement of the vessel must have been truly harrowing. And the doctor that cared for them, they were taken very quickly to accident emergency services over in Palermo, a few miles away from Porticello. The doctor she was telling the
the doctors and nurses how she was incredibly upset. She was shaken and she just kept thinking about those who didn't make it. And it must have become quite apparent because those some 15 survivors were clinging on to a life raft which had been deployed off the vessel, among them the captain, among them other crew members, but also passengers on board too. Were clinging to...
Ashton, I just wanted to ask, and you perhaps can turn around over your shoulder and talk us through, but it looks like some of the boats are returning in, and we might have to cut away from those live pictures in a moment, but whilst it's still docking, is this the boat, the main boat that has been part of the search and rescue throughout the course of the last few days? And of course, this comes at a moment whilst they are still looking for the body of 18-year-old Hannah Lynch.
They are. It looks as though... So that is the vessel that has been bringing ashore those bodies that have been found and retrieved. There is an ambulance on standby. It doesn't look in my line of vision that they are carrying anything. Usually when those bodies are being recovered and when they are being brought ashore, there are two divers. They're dressed in very distinctive bright orange wetsuits, and they're standing on the back of the vessel of that very same boat that you're seeing on your screen. That red hull, that belongs to both the firefighters and the search and rescue teams have been operating off this vessel. That is the one that has had the bodies loaded onto it, and that is the vessel that they come from. It doesn't look to my eye that is happening. It could well be that's a change of divers. It could be or even just another briefing to kind of gather their thoughts, collate where they are.
And Ashna, we were hearing, of course, earlier from a former Royal Navy submarine captain about the huge amounts of both physical and psychological stress that the divers will have faced over the course of last week. And of course, they've been coming in and out over many hours and days. We have just under a minute left. Remind us of the key headline this morning, Ashna, that has broken.
A word on those first responders, on those divers who will have faced the most distressing and traumatising of sights. They knew they were looking for 6 people on board that vessel. Today, we have confirmed this morning by the Italian coastguard that 5 people have been recovered and have been identified. Among them, 59-year-old Mike Lynch. So too has been recovered Judith Bloomer, the chairman of Morgan Stanley International, his wife, also the wife of Chris Morvillo, and also Chris Morvillo too, he the lawyer that represented Mike Lynch in June.
Ashna Hurinag, fantastic work. Thank you so much. To reconfirm, Mike Lynch, Jonathan and Judith Bloomer, Christopher and Neda Morvillo, 5 people confirmed to have died on board the Bayesian alongside Ricardo Thomas earlier in the week. We're going to take a very quick break here on Sky News, but Gareth Barlow will be up next with Ashna with all of the very latest.